The Salt Lark was where aspirations came to die. You could smell it under the bleach and stale beer, the damp, salty rot of Brineport, New Jersey, and on a Tuesday night, that smell was practically a person, sitting in the back booth, nursing a flat draft. I tapped the microphone. The feedback squeal made the 3 tourists near the front wince. Good. At least they were paying attention. "So," I said, leaning into the weak spotlight that always smelled like burning dust, "I'm a waitress here, which means my life is basically a series of small, polite surrenders for about 12% of what I'm actually owed." A few sympathetic chuckles. Mick Darrow, the owner, polished a glass behind the bar, his eyes scanning the room. He looked more nervous than usual. "You meet all kinds in Brineport," I continued, scanning my mental cue cards of half-baked jokes. "Last week, a guy told me he worked in waste management. I said, 'Oh, like sanitation?' He says, 'No, sweetheart, more like recycling.'" The guy was wearing a $2,000 suit and had a pinky ring the size of a walnut. The room was warming up. This was my moment. This was the bit I'd been working on. "Everyone in this town thinks they're tough," I said, dropping my voice. "They talk about the old days, the unions, the families. But let's be real. If I ever actually met one of these big-shot Mafia bosses," I paused, looked over my shoulder as if checking for spies, "I'd take him out." I snapped my fingers. Done. One less monster, one more parking space. Tamsin Reed, public servant. The room broke. It was a good laugh, loud, sharp, surprised. It felt good. It felt like power. Something I hadn't felt in, well, ever. I was Tamsin Reed by day. I hauled plates of fried clams by night, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. I was a stand-up comic who couldn't get booked anywhere else. My eyes scanned the room, soaking in the applause. I saw the reservation list in my head. Most of the tables were walk-ins. But then there was the reservation slip Mick had handed me during my shift. The ink smudged Table 7 private. I hadn't even seen them come in. The alcove for Table 7 was deep, shadowed by a heavy velvet curtain that Mick usually kept tied back. Tonight, it was drawn, leaving just a 6-inch gap. I couldn't see a face, just the impression of a dark suit and the occasional glint of a watch. Private. The laughter died down, but a new noise replaced it. From Table 3. "That ain't funny," a gravelly voice called out. I squinted. Table 3. 4 guys, all stuffed into suits that looked like they'd been slept in for a week. They hadn't touched their steaks. They were whiskey men. "Tough crowd," I said into the mic, forcing a smile. "You think you're tough," another one slurred, pointing a thick finger at me. "Talking like that. You're just a mouth. Sweetheart, a weak little thing." The air went cold. This wasn't heckling, this was something else. This was Brineport reminding me what I was. "Hey, guys, it's just jokes," I said, the microphone suddenly feeling heavy. "We don't like those jokes," the first man said, starting to stand up. His chair scraped, a sound like a threat. Across the room, I saw Mick Darrow. His face was pale. He wasn't looking at Table 3. He was looking toward the curtained alcove of Table 7. He caught my eye and immediately, frantically, tapped his watch and then drew a finger across his throat. "Cut, now." "Well, that's my time, folks," I stammered, forcing the smile so wide my cheeks ached. "You've been an audience. I'm Tamsin Reed. Please tip your me." I practically fell off the low stage, the sparse applause dying as soon as my foot hit the sticky floor. I rushed straight to the bar, grabbing my apron. "What was that?" "Mick," I whispered, my hands shaking as I tied the strings. "They regulars." "No," Mick muttered, his eyes darting between Table 3 and Table 7. "And they need to leave. Tamsin, just stay behind the bar. Don't go near them. We have sensitive guests tonight. Very sensitive." Sensitive eye looked at Table 3. The one who had stood up was watching me. His eyes, small and mean. They look like they're about to start a brawl. "Not them," Mick hissed, moving away to take an order. "Them." He nodded at Table 7. I was about to ask what he meant when the men from Table 3 pushed their chairs back and swaggered toward the bar. My stomach turned to ice. This was the part I hated, the part I'd lived through 100 times, the casual harassment, the assumption that because I served them, I belonged to them. "Hey," the leader said, leaning his thick forearms on the bar top, blocking my path to the register. He smelled like cheap whiskey and something metallic, like old pennies. "Funny girl." "Can I get you guys the check?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the polished wood. "We ain't done," he said. "You got a smart mouth? I wonder if the rest of you is smart." He reached out, fast, not for my arm, but for my hand, the one gripping a wet rag. He was going to grab my wrist. I flinched, bracing for the grip, for the humiliation, for the part where I'd have to laugh it off or risk getting fired. Clink. It was the quietest sound in the room, but it cut through the haze of the jukebox and the clatter of plates. Clink. It came from table 7. The man from table 3 froze, his hand hovering over mine. He turned, slowly. I looked, too. From the deep shadow of the alcove, a man was leaning slightly into the light. All I could see was his hand, resting on the table. He was tapping a single finger against a whiskey tumbler. Clink. He did it one more time. Clink. The men from table 3 looked at each other, their booze-fueled confidence vanishing like smoke. And then, 2 men were simply there. They hadn't come from the door. They hadn't come from the bathrooms. They'd been standing against the back wall, in shadows so deep I'd mistaken them for architecture. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits, a stark contrast to the rumpled messes at table 3. They didn't speak. They just stood, one on either side of the man who had tried to grab me. One of the new men was built like a refrigerator. The other was slighter, with a long scar that cut down his cheek. But his eyes were the scary part. They were completely flat, dead. The man from table 3 slowly, very slowly, pulled his hand back from the bar. "We were just leaving," he mumbled, not looking at me, looking only at the silent men flanking him. "A good choice," the scar-faced man whispered. It was the only thing said. The 4 of them scrambled, throwing cash onto their table way too much. A panic payment, and practically ran out the door, the bell above it jingling violently. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My knees felt weak. Mick looked like he was going to be sick. The 2 bodyguards, they had to be bodyguards, didn't look at me. They melted back into the shadows they'd come from. I was left staring at table 7. The man in the alcove leaned back, disappearing into the curtained darkness again. I couldn't see his face. I spent the next hour cleaning up, my hands still shaking. By the time I'd wiped down the last table, the place was empty, almost. Table 7. I took a deep breath. "Mick, should I—" "Go," Mick said, his back to me. "Just get the check. Don't talk. Just take the payment and go." I walked over, my footsteps echoing in the empty tavern. The curtain was still drawn. I pulled it back, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. He was alone. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30-something. He had dark hair, an angular face, and the kind of stillness that makes you nervous. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the empty glass on his table. "Sir," I said, my voice barely a squeak, your check." He didn't look up. He just gestured to the table. A thick fold of cash was sitting there, and resting on top of it, holding it down, was a starched white linen napkin with the number 7 stitched in the corner. He rose, smooth and silent. He was tall. He paused, close enough that I could smell the absurdly expensive cologne, something woody and sharp. He still didn't look directly at me, but inclined his head slightly. It wasn't quite a nod. It felt more like an apology, not for himself, but for the entire, terrible night. Then he was gone. He walked out, and the 2 men in suits materialized from the entryway and followed him into the foggy Brineport night. I picked up the cash. My breath hitched. It was thick. I counted it under the bar light, a few $100s, for 1 whiskey. I locked up and started the long walk home. My apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a rickety pre-war building overlooking Pier Harlow. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The air was cold, tasting of salt and diesel from the container ships. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, my feet aching. I was thinking about the man at table 7, about the clink of the glass. I put my key in the lock. It wasn't locked. The door swung open onto darkness. I froze. A draft was coming from inside. My window wasn't open. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small. I flicked the light switch, and my heart stopped. My tiny studio loft had been torn apart, but not in a violent way. It was precise. My cheap secondhand furniture was pulled away from the walls. My mattress was flipped, and the worst part, my box of comedy props, the one thing that was just mine, was overturned. Rubber chickens, fake glasses, notebooks filled with half-formed jokes all scattered across the floorboards. They weren't looking for money. I didn't have any. They were looking for something specific. I backed against the wall, my hand fumbling in my pocket for my phone. That's when I saw it. Under the wooden chair I used as a nightstand, there was an envelope, plain white. It hadn't been there this morning. My blood ran cold. I knelt, my knees cracking on the old wood. I picked it up. My name wasn't on it. Nothing was. I opened the flap. Inside was a single piece of paper, a cheap piece of printer paper, and a single, typed sentence. "Pay Jem's debt by Friday or you disappear." Jem, my little brother, my stupid, brilliant, reckless little brother. He'd gotten into gambling. Badly. I hadn't seen him in 3 weeks. He'd just vanished. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers slipping on the screen. I hit his contact. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Jem. Leave a message. Or don't. I'm probably busy." "Jem, please." I whispered into the phone, tears blurring the ransacked room. "Jem, call me. Please, I got a note. I don't know what to do." I hung up and scrolled through our last texts. Just me, begging him to call, begging him to be safe. And then, one. His last message to me, sent 2 weeks ago at 3 in the morning. "Don't go to Warehouse Moth." I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, my body shaking. This was it. This was the moment my entire life had been balancing toward. I had no family left but Jem. My pay barely covered my rent, which I was already 2 months behind on. I'd spent my whole life being the girl who takes the harassment, who smiles for the tip, who bites her tongue because she has no other choice. I was weak, just like the man at table 3 had said. I had no one. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, just shaking in the ruins of my apartment. I finally managed to stand, my legs unsteady. I walked to the window, looking down at the wet street, at the fog rolling in off the pier. And I saw it. Parked directly across the street, under a flickering sodium streetlight, was a black sedan. It was sleek and expensive and had no place in this neighborhood. A man was leaning against the driver's side door, half hidden in the shadow of the car. He was smoking. I watched as he took a slow drag. The cherry of the cigarette flared, a tiny ember in the dark, and in that brief, red glow, I saw his eyes. He was looking right up at me, right into my window. My body went rigid. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He didn't wave. He didn't move. He just watched. My phone buzzed in my hand. I tore my eyes from the man who was still watching, the red ember glowing again, and looked at the screen. An unknown number. A new text message. "Don't joke about killing a boss when one is at table number 7. But it was a cute joke. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. I looked back out the window. The man was gone. The sedan was gone. There was just the empty, wet street. I backed away from the window, my whole body trembling. The joke. Table 7, the man with the quiet hands and the invisible army. This wasn't about Jem's gambling debt. Not just... I'd spent my whole life being weak, invisible, and safe, and tonight, with one stupid joke, I had made myself seen. And I had no idea who or what was pulling me into a story that was so much bigger and so much more terrifying than I could ever survive. I didn't sleep. Sleep wasn't possible. I sat on my mattress, which was still flipped on its side, until the first gray, greasy light of dawn crept in from the window. The text message burned in my phone's memory. Table number 7. The note about Jem, Friday. My apartment, which had always felt like a flimsy shelter, now felt like a stage, a set where I was the only one who didn't know the lines. The man in the sedan was gone, but the feeling of being watched was everywhere. It was in the way the shadows clung to the corners. I stood up, my joints cracking. I had to move. I had to do something. The note meant they thought I knew where Jem was, or knew what he had. The text message that meant something else entirely. It meant the man from table 7, the quiet one, was involved. Was he threatening me too? Or was it a warning? Don't go to Warehouse Moth. Jem's last text, the only lead I had. I looked at my trashed apartment. They had been thorough. My comedy notebooks were riffled, my cheap props scattered. They'd been looking for something small. My spare key. I kept one taped under the loose fire escape grating. Only one person knew that, Jem. The key was gone. Whoever took it had been in here before last night. They had taken the key, and then they had come back to search. They must have thought Jem gave me something. Warehouse Moth. It was an old textile mill over by the Toxic Basin, abandoned for maybe 20 years. We used to dare each other to go in there as kids. In high school, Jem and his theater nerd friends had used it to build sets for their weird, experimental plays. I put on my work sneakers, the ones with the soles worn smooth. I grabbed my thin jacket and my purse, which contained my wallet, holding $17, a pepper spray I'd never used, and a half-eaten granola bar. I was a warrior heading into battle. It was pathetic. The walk was 2 miles, across the bridge where the wind tried to peel my skin off. Brineport in the morning is all gray steel, gray water, and the smell of dead fish. Every car that passed made me jump. Every person I saw was a potential threat. The man from the sedan, the men from table 3. Warehouse Moth loomed up from the weeds. It was a brick behemoth, its windows all smashed, its face covered in a massive faded graffiti painting of a lunar moth. The front door was a sheet of corrugated steel, padlocked. I went around the side, following a path beaten down in the weeds. Jem's old entrance, a loose basement window, the frame rotted out. I slipped through, landing on a pile of damp, mildewed rags. The air was dead, cold, and it stank. Not just of mold and rust, underneath, sharp and clean, was the smell of industrial bleach. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Jem," I whispered. Silence. Just the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the massive darkness. I pulled out my phone. Turning on the flashlight, the beam cut a weak cone in the gloom. I was in a vast, open space. Skeletons of weaving looms stood in rows, like a metal forest. Someone had been here, recently. There were things. In the middle of the floor, where Jem used to build his sets, was a cleared space. Not swept, but organized. A single cold steel table stood under a bare bulb that was dark. Near it, a folding chair was knocked over. This was wrong. This wasn't Jem's theater kid mess. This was sterile. I walked closer, my sneakers crunching on grit. I saw a dark, rust-colored stain on the concrete. Someone had tried to scrub it away. The smell of bleach was suffocatingly strong right here. And then I saw the drag mark. Starting near the table, 2 parallel scuffs in the grime, heading toward a small steel utility door on the far wall, the mark of heels being dragged. "Oh God, Jem," I breathed, my hand flying to my mouth. I backed away, stumbling over something. I shone my light down. It was a box, a familiar, battered cardboard box. "Jem's props keep out," scrawled on the side in his dramatic teenage handwriting. It was one of the boxes he'd stored here years ago. It was overturned, just like the prop box in my apartment. They'd been here, too. The same people. I knelt, my flashlight beam playing over the scattered contents. Fake mustaches, a broken magic wand, a deck of trick cards. I pushed a few things aside, my fingers numb with cold and fear. My fingertips brushed something small, taped to the underside of the overturned box, hidden in a fold of cardboard, a small, white plastic square. I peeled it off. It was a sticker, but thick, an NFC chip. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I fumbled with the settings, turning on the NFC reader. I held the chip to the back of the phone. A notification popped up, data read. I tapped it. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a location. It was just a string of code, a jumble of letters and numbers that meant nothing to me. A77 orchid seed K17B. And below it, a logo, a stylized A that looked like a shield, or maybe a mountain. Underneath it, 2 words. Aegis Bureau. I'd never heard of them. That doesn't belong to you. The voice came from everywhere at once. It was deep, rough, and full of gravel. I screamed, scrambling to my feet, dropping the chip. I spun around, my flashlight beam finding them. 3 men. They had come from the main entrance, their boots silent on the concrete. They blocked the only way I knew how to get out. The man in the middle was the one who had spoken. He was built like a vending machine square, solid and heavy. He was completely bald, his head reflecting the weak light from the broken windows. He wore a black tactical jacket, the kind with too many pockets. The 2 men behind him were thin, nervous, and looked like they hadn't slept in a week. I was just looking for my brother, I stammered. The bald man, Rook, took a step forward. He ignored my words completely. His eyes were flat, like 2 gray stones. The key, little girl, give it to me. What key? I don't have a key. Don't play stupid, he growled. We know he gave it to you. The orchid access key. Orchid seed, the code on the chip. My blood went colder. I glanced at the floor where the chip had fallen. Rook's eyes followed my gaze. Ah, there it is. He nodded at one of his men, who darted forward to pick it up. I just found it, I said, my voice high and thin. I don't know what it is. She's lying, the nervous man said, pocketing the chip. Doesn't matter, Rook said, his attention locking back onto me. He took another step. He was too close now. I could smell his sweat. Stale cigarettes. He gave you the hardware. Where is it? I don't know what you're talking about. Jem Reed, your brother, he stole something from our employers. A data seed. He gave it to you. We know you met. We didn't meet. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. Rook sighed, a sound of profound impatience. This is boring. He reached for me, not fast, like the man at the bar last night. He was slow, deliberate. He was going to grab my shoulder, and he was going to break something. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, for the pain. It never came. She's my guest. The voice was quiet, cultured. It came from the shadows behind me, from the direction of the steel utility door. I opened my eyes. Rook had frozen, his hands still in the air. His head was cocked, listening. Cassio Vallone stepped out of the darkness. He looked exactly as he had at table 7, but somehow more real, more dangerous without the velvet curtain. He wore a dark wool overcoat that probably cost more than my apartment. He wasn't armed. He didn't look threatening. He just looked calm. Behind him, the 2 bodyguards from last night materialized, the refrigerator and the scar. Rook slowly lowered his hand. He stared at Cassio, and for the first time, I saw something in his dead eyes. Not fear, recognition and calculation. Vallone, Rook said. It wasn't a question. This ain't your business. This is an orchid tier operation. It is now, Cassio said. His voice was smooth, like expensive whiskey. She's with me. Rook's men looked terrified. They were looking at the scar-faced bodyguard, who was smiling. A tiny, awful smile. Rook, however, held his ground. The Night Harbor Alliance won't like you interfering. Cassio, this is high level. Cassio ignored him. He walked forward, past Rook, stopping directly in front of me. I was trapped between them. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. You're standing on my chair, he said to Rook. I looked down. Rook's boot was planted firmly on the folding chair that had been knocked over. Rook scoffed. "What?" Cassio bent down, his movements economical and precise. He put one hand on the chair and gently, but firmly, pushed Rook's foot off it. He picked up the chair, folded it with a metallic snap, and leaned it against the steel table. Then he turned to me. His eyes met mine for the first time. They were dark, almost black, and I couldn't read them at all. He reached out. I flinched again. He stopped, his hand hovering. He was pointing at my jacket. "You have dust on your sleeve." He gently, almost formally, brushed the concrete dust from my shoulder. His fingers were warm. Even in the freezing warehouse, the gesture was so intimate, so strangely domestic in this place of violence, that it short-circuited my brain. He turned back to Rook. His expression hadn't changed, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Don't touch my people a second time," he said. Rook's face turned a dull, angry red. He was a brute, and Cassio had just embarrassed him with a chair and a piece of dust. "You think you're clever, you snake!" Rook spat, and he moved. He was fast. He pulled a knife from his jacket, a switchblade. The click of it opening echoed in the huge space. He wasn't aiming for Cassio. He was aiming for me. He was going to grab me, use me as a shield. He never had the chance. Cassio moved in a way I couldn't follow. It wasn't a fight, it was punctuation. He pushed me backward, hard, out of the way. "Tamsin, stay." As Rook lunged, Cassio didn't block the knife. He met the wrist. Something white flashed in his hand. It was the napkin, the white linen napkin from table 7. He had it in his fist. He used it, wrapping it around Rook's wrist as the knife came down. Rook screamed a high, thin sound. Cassio hadn't blocked. He had trapped. He twisted his body, using Rook's own momentum, and there was a wet pop of a joint dislocation. The knife clattered to the floor. Rook was on his knees, clutching his arm, his face pale with agony. Cassio Vallone stood over him, breathing normally. He was still holding the napkin. He used a clean corner to wipe his own fingers, as if he'd touched something distasteful. "Get out," Cassio said, his voice still quiet. Rook's 2 men, who had never moved, were already backing away. They helped their boss to his feet. Rook cradled his arm, his face a mask of hate. This isn't over, Vallone," Rook hissed, pain making his voice ragged. "The FCSD is going to security check her. They'll find out what she knows. They'll sweep her right up." "FCSD," I whispered. Rook spat on the floor. "Federal Commerce Security Directorate. They don't like witnesses." They stumbled out, vanishing into the gray light. I was left alone with Cassio Vallone and his 2 silent shadows. My entire body was vibrating, a low-frequency hum of pure terror. Cassio turned to me, and he looked unbothered. He tucked the white napkin back into his breast pocket. He carried it like a talisman. "The chip," he said, "it was an order." They took it." "No," he said. He pointed to his scar-faced bodyguard. The man opened his hand. The white NFC chip sat in his palm. He must have plucked it off the other man in the confusion. He said it was an orchid key," I managed to say. "He said Jem stole it." Cassio took the chip. He looked at it, his eyes narrowing. He didn't need a phone. He seemed to understand it just by looking. "The Aegis Bureau was a private intelligence firm," he said, his voice flat, like a newsreader. "They bugged the whole port. Unions, shipping lines, everyone. They went under, and their data archive, their orchid archive, went dark. Someone, your brother, found a seed key. A piece of hardware that opens a specific file. This chip is just the access code for it." He pieced it together instantly, clinically. Jem took the wrong thing. He probably thought it was blackmail material he could sell. But it's not. It's a digital memory archive. It's a ledger. Proof of transactions between the Night Harbor Alliance and other parties. He looked at the utility door Rook's men hadn't noticed. The door Jem had been dragged through. "He's still alive," Cassio said. How do you know?" "Because they don't have the hardware key, just the access chip." He looked at me. "They tore your apartment apart. They were here. They don't have it. which means they still need Jem to tell them where it is. Or, his eyes held mine, or they'll use you to make him talk. The threat from last night slammed back into me. Pay Jem's debt by Friday or you disappear. It wasn't about money. It was about this. Who are you? I whispered. I'm the man who was at table 7, see, he said, as if that explained everything. Rook and his crew, Orchid Tier. They're the muscle for the Alliance. My competition, the FCSD, he scoffed, is what the Alliance calls itself when it wants to sound legitimate. He had just described a war I was now standing in the middle of, wearing dirty sneakers and a $10 jacket. What do? I asked. The question sounded pathetic. Cassio Vallone looked at me for a long time. I saw the calculation in his eyes. I wasn't a person to him. I was a piece on a board, a guest. For now, he said, you come with me, because if you stay here, you'll be gone in an hour, and I don't like when people touch my things. He started walking toward the exit, not looking back, assuming I would follow. And I did. I had no family. I had no money. And the entire criminal underworld of Brineport and a shadow agency called the FCSD thought I had something they wanted. I was Tamsin Reed. I was the weak girl, the one who told jokes because she was too afraid to speak the truth. And I had just accepted the protection of a man who used a dinner napkin to break another man's arm. I had no other choice. I followed him out of the warehouse. My legs felt like they were made of wet cement. His 2 men, the mountain of a man and the one with the pale scar, didn't follow us. They moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency, disappearing toward a black SUV parked a block away, its engine already running. They were shadows, and he was the thing casting them. Cassio, however, walked me to a different car. It was a vintage coupe, low and dark, maybe a deep midnight blue. It was from the 60s, or maybe the early 70s, a relic of a time when steel was thick and gas was cheap. He opened the passenger door for me. The simple courtesy felt bizarre. Rook had tried to grab me. Cassio opened my door. I slid onto the seat. The inside smelled like old, perfectly cured leather, furniture polish, and something else, maybe just money. It was the quietest place I'd ever been. The heavy door closed with a solid, definitive thunk, and the sounds of Brineport, the distant gulls, the wind, my own ragged breathing were suddenly muffled, worlds away. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. Not just a little shake, but a deep, uncontrollable vibration, a tremor that started in my stomach and radiated out. I was still clutching my purse, the one with the $17 and the pepper spray. It felt like a child's toy. Cassio got in the driver's side. He moved with no wasted effort. He started the engine, and it didn't roar. It purred, a low, deep vibration I felt through the floor. He didn't turn on the radio. Quiet music simply began, jazz, a lonely, melancholy saxophone. He pulled out of the alley, his hands resting lightly on the thin wooden steering wheel. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what I knew about Jem. He didn't ask about the chip, or Rook, or the warehouse. He just drove. The silence, combined with the low thrum of the engine, made the shaking worse. My teeth started to chatter, a tiny, humiliating click, click, click. I clenched my jaw, pressing my hands between my knees, trying to physically hold my body still. In the glove compartment. His voice was soft, not startling, but it filled the small space. I fumbled with the polished chrome latch. It opened smoothly. Inside, there was no clutter, no old napkins, no insurance cards, just a small, elegant box of tissues. "You're shaking," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. He glanced at me. Just for a second, he reached over, his arm moving into my space. I flinched, pressing myself against the door. I couldn't help it. He stopped. His hand froze in midair, inches from my knee. He wasn't reaching for me. He was reaching for the dashboard. He slowly, deliberately turned a knob. The heat, which had been off, clicked on, and a faint rush of warm air brushed my ankles. His hand retreated. He hadn't touched me. The men at the Salt Lark? The drunks at table 3, the regulars who thought a tip bought them the right to my time they always touched, a playful swat, a hand that lingered too long on my lower back as I passed, a grip on my wrist. This man, who had taken another man apart in a single fluid motion, had just given me heat and space. That small act of respect broke something inside me. The tears I'd been holding back since I saw my ransacked apartment, since I'd smelled the bleach in the warehouse, finally came. They weren't loud, sobbing tears. They were the weak, silent kind, the kind that just spill over, hot and shameful, down your cold cheeks. I pulled a tissue from the box and pressed it to my face, mortified. "It's all right," he said, his eyes on the road. "Just breathe." We drove for 20 minutes. We left the rotting piers and the industrial wasteland behind, heading toward the old city hill, the part of Brineport that tourists read about but never found. The streets were cobblestone, lined with massive stone buildings that had been there for 200 years. He pulled into a narrow, weed-choked alley behind a massive, Gothic-style church. St. Lyrian's, a wrought iron fence, tall and spiked, surrounded it. A heavy chain and a rusted-over padlock held the gate shut. The windows were dark. It's condemned," I whispered, my voice thick. "It's private property," he corrected. He got out. The black SUV was already there, parked at the mouth of the alley, blocking us from the street. The 2 bodyguards stood by the gate, impassive. They weren't just following us, they had preceded us. Cassio took a key from his coat, not a modern brass key, but a long, black skeleton key. He didn't bother with the rusted padlock. He used the key on the gate's main lock, which swung open with a well-oiled, silent click. He led me through the gate, not to the grand front doors, but to a small, heavy oak door tucked into the side of the stone, half hidden by ivy. He unlocked that, too. The air inside was cold and still, but it wasn't the damp, moldy air of the warehouse. It was dry, clean. We were in a vast open sanctuary. All the pews were gone, the floor covered in neatly folded drop cloths. The only light came from the massive, towering stained glass windows, which painted the dusty floor in huge, abstract rivers of deep blue, violet and blood red. It was silent as a tomb. "Where are we?" I breathed. "A safe room," he said. He didn't walk to the center. He walked toward the altar and the massive, silent pipe organ that covered the entire back wall. He went to the side of the organ, to a section of carved wooden paneling. He pressed his fingers against the wood in a specific sequence, not a code, but a pattern. There was a low thud and a section of the wall popped open, revealing a narrow, dark staircase going down. I hesitated. "It's safer than your apartment," he said. He led the way. The room below was the opposite of the ancient church above. It was small, concrete, and sterile. A bank of computer monitors sat dark on a metal desk. A server rack hummed quietly in the corner. There was a metal cot against one wall, folded with a clean, gray blanket. "Please," he said, gesturing to the cot. I sat on the edge. It was cold. Cassio sat at the desk. He took the white NFC chip from his pocket. His man must have given it to him and slotted it into a reader attached to the computer. He woke the machine. The string of code I'd seen on my phone appeared on the monitor: A77 Orchid Seed K17B. "The Aegis Bureau," he said, his voice low, half to himself. "They were very good. Too good. I've never heard of them." "You wouldn't have..." "They weren't government. They were a private intelligence firm. They put spies everywhere. On the docks, in the shipping offices, in the city council. They built a fortress of data. Every secret in Brineport, the Night Harbor Alliance. My competitors, they were Aegis's biggest client, until Aegis got greedy." "What happened to them?" "They imploded," he said simply. "The founders vanished, but the data didn't. It's sitting in a dark archive, a digital ghost, and now, the old agents, men like Rook, are selling off the keys, one piece at a time, to the highest bidder." His fingers moved over the keyboard, fast and sure. He cross-referenced the code. "And your brother," he said, his voice void of judgment, "stumbled into the middle of the sale." He pointed at the screen. "This string K17B. It's not just a file, it's a location, a physical Dropbox. It corresponds to an archival locker at an old photo studio, Agnes and Sons, in the Glass Ferry district." Glass Ferry, Gem, Orchid, Aegis. The words hammered at me. It was too much. This was a story for movies, for people who weren't me. I was the girl who worried about making rent, who practiced jokes in the mirror, who was behind on her electric bill. The shaking started again, worse this time. "I can't," I whispered. The admission tore out of me before I could stop it. "I can't do this." Cassio stopped typing. He turned his chair slowly to face me. He just sat there, watching me. His stillness was unnerving. I'm not like you," I stammered, the words spilling out, hot and frantic. "I'm the girl who serves the fried clams. I'm the one who gets harassed at the bar and has to laugh it off or I lose my job. That's what I do. Okay, I take it. I endure it to pay my rent, to hope Jem was okay. I'm weak. I'm the girl who tells the joke, not the one who does this." I stopped, breathless. I waited for him to agree, to tell me I was useless, a liability. The silence stretched. The only sound was the low hum of the server. The light from the stained glass window high above us found its way down the narrow stairwell, casting a single, sharp band of deep, bruised purple across his face. It split him in two. One side was in shadow, the other was awash in that strange, holy light. "You think I'm not afraid?" he asked. His voice was so quiet I almost missed it. I let out a short, hysterical laugh. You disarmed that man with a napkin." "Courage isn't about not being afraid, Tamsin," he said. He'd used my name. It sounded different in his mouth. Not a name on a work schedule, but something solid. "It's about being terrified," he continued, "and taking the next step anyway. You went to the warehouse, didn't you, alone?" "I went for Jem," I shot back. "You went. That's all that matters." I stared at him, really stared in that bizarre, colored light. He wasn't just a monster. He wasn't just the quiet, terrifying man from Table 7. He looked tired and profoundly lonely. He was dangerous. Yes, but there was a gentleness there, too. The way he'd given me the tissue, the way he'd brushed the dust off my jacket in the warehouse. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, the question raw. Last night, today, why me? He looked away, back at the dark monitor, as if the answer were hidden in the code. "Brineport is built on fear," he said, his voice flat. "It's a structure. Everyone knows who to be afraid of. The unions are afraid of the Alliance. The Alliance is afraid of me. And I am afraid of other things. Everyone knows their place. It's how the city functions." He turned back, and his dark eyes pinned me. "And then there's you. You walk onto a stage in a room full of my people and my enemies, and you tell a joke. You joke about killing a man like me." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "You said it like you had no idea, like no one had ever bothered to teach you who you're supposed to be afraid of." He paused, and the smile faded. I found it refreshing. I had no answer to that. He was risking a war because of my bad stand-up bit. I must have started shaking again, because he noticed. The cold from the concrete walls was seeping into my bones. He reached into the breast pocket of his dark overcoat. He pulled out the napkin. The white linen napkin from Table 7. It was folded into a perfect square, creased but clean. The number 7 was stitched in the corner in neat, black thread. He stood up. I tensed, my body automatically bracing. He walked the few steps to the cot. He didn't reach for me. He just unfolded the napkin, and he draped it, very gently, over my shoulders. It was absurd. It was a piece of restaurant linen. It offered no warmth. But as it rested on me, I felt my shaking slow down. It was a gesture, a public declaration. It was the first time in my entire life that anyone, let alone a man this powerful, had openly, physically, chosen my side. It felt like a shield. It felt like a cape. "You're not weak, Tamsin," he said, his voice just for me. "You're just undefended." He stepped back. "We should go. If Rook is working with the FCSD, they'll be moving fast. They'll be heading for Glass Ferry to find that locker." "The FCSD," I said, the name feeling bitter. "Rook said they were federal." "They're a ghost," Cassio said, shutting down the computer and gathering his things. "They're a shell corporation with a government seal. The Federal Commerce Security Directorate. They're supposed to protect the port. Instead, they own it." He led me back up the narrow stairs, into the vast, cold sanctuary. He pressed the panel. The wall sealed shut with a quiet thud, leaving no trace. We walked out of the church, into the alley. The wind had picked up. The gray morning had turned into a heavy, oppressive afternoon. A storm was coming. I could smell the ozone in the air, the sharp scent of static mixing with the salt from the bay. We stood there for a beat, caught between the dead church and the waiting car. I was still wearing the napkin over my shoulders. The silence between us was different now. It wasn't empty. It was full. It was the quiet of two people who both knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the worst was just about to begin. He held the car door open for me. I got in. Glass Ferry wasn't a ferry at all. It was a neighborhood of old glass-blowing factories that had gone bust 50 years ago and been colonized by artists. Now it was all peeling paint, hopeful galleries and derelict warehouses, and the constant grinding sound of the elevated train. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke as Cassio pulled the coupe onto the cobblestone street. The rain wasn't a drizzle. It was a horizontal assault. It hit the windshield in sheets, the wipers fighting a losing battle. "Agnes and Sons," and Cassio said, parking in an alley between a pottery studio and a boarded-up storefront. The sign for the photo studio was antique, hand-painted on the glass, but the lights were off. It was closed. The black SUV was nowhere to be seen, but I knew, with a sudden, sinking certainty, that his men were close. They were the fog. "They'll be here soon," I said, my voice thin, stating the obvious. "Then we need to be faster." Cassio replied. He didn't seem concerned. He got out of the car, the rain plastering his dark hair to his head in an instant. I scrambled after him, the napkin, my absurd, precious shield, still clutched in my hand. I'd stuffed it into my pocket at the church. The studio's front door was set into a deep alcove. The lock was an old, heavy brass thing. Cassio didn't hesitate. He pulled a thin, black leather case from his coat pocket. From it, he selected two slender pieces of metal. They didn't look like lockpicks. They looked like surgical tools. He didn't jam them in. He didn't force it. He slid them into the keyhole with a delicacy that was almost unnerving. His movements were elegant, his touch light. He tilted his head, listening. There was a tiny, oiled click, and the heavy door swung open. No alarms, no noise. He'd been quieter than a key. He ushered me inside, and the sound of the rain was instantly cut in half, replaced by a profound, chemical-laced silence. The front of the studio was a small gallery. Black and white photos of Brineport docks hung on the walls, ghostly. Beautiful images of the very place that was trying to swallow me. "The archive," Cassio said, walking past the front desk. "It would be in the back, in the dark room." He found the door, a heavy thing with a revolving "Do Not Enter" sign on it. He pushed it open. We were plunged into a different world. The only light came from a single, long, red bulb, a safe light running the length of the ceiling. It painted everything in a deep, bloody monochrome. The air was thick with the sharp, acidic tang of stop bath and the metallic smell of fixer. It was the smell of preserved memories. Long stainless steel sinks lined one wall, filled with trays of chemicals. An enlarger stood on a counter like a one-eyed robot, and hanging from wires strung across the room. Dozens of black and white photos dripped silently onto the floor. "AK-17B," I whispered, my heart thudding in time with the dripping. Where would a locker be? Look for something that doesn't belong, Cassio said. His voice was a low rumble in the red darkness. He scanned the walls, tapping the plasterboard. I looked at the equipment. It was all old, all analog. This was a place for artists, not digital spies. My eyes drifted to the drying photos. They were portraits, street scenes, and then one. It was a negative, not a print, still wet, hanging by a single clip. Cassio. He was beside me in a second. I pointed. The negative was a long shot of the harbor. A massive container ship was docked at a pier. "The Vesper Blue," he said, his voice hardening. "She was in port the night your brother disappeared." How do you know that?" "It's my business to know what ships are in my port." I looked closer. Even in the negative, I could see tiny figures on the dock, near a specific container. It was impossible to tell who they was, but I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This was a record. "The mirror," Cassio said, turning away from the negative. I followed his gaze. On the back wall, a large, cracked mirror was hung. It was the one thing that made no sense. Why would you have a mirror in a light-sensitive darkroom? He walked to it, and he didn't try to pull it off the wall. He ran his fingers along the cheap wooden frame. "It's a door." He found the catch, a tiny, almost invisible nub hidden in the carving. He pressed it. With a heavy, scraping sound, the mirror swung outward, revealing a black, square hole in the wall. Inside was a small, gray metal safe. It didn't have a dial. It just had a smooth, blank face. "No keypad," I said, confused. "No, it's in sequence lock. Aegis loved these. They're tied to the room." Cassio ran his hand over the blank metal. "It's waiting for a pattern." He looked around the room, at the enlarger, the timer, the trays. It could be anything. I looked at the setup, and something clicked. Not as a waitress, not as a terrified victim, as a performer, as someone who wrote scripts. "It's a process," I said, thinking aloud. It's a script, a set of actions. This is a dark room. You don't just do things randomly. You follow the steps, in order." Cassio looked at me, his dark eyes sharp in the red light. "Go on." "Okay," I said, my brain suddenly, blessedly clear. "Okay, you start with the light, the enlarger." I walked over and touched the heavy metal housing, underneath, hidden from view. I felt a small, recessed button. I pressed it. A tiny green LED lit up on the face of the safe. "1," Cassio breathed. Then you developed the print," I said, moving to the chemical trays. "Which one, developer? This one, the first tray." I dipped my fingers in the cold, oily liquid and found a pressure plate at the bottom of the plastic. I pressed it. Beep! The green light flashed. "Stop bath," I said, moving to the next tray, the one with the sharp vinegar smell. I pressed the plate. Beep. And finally, fixer, to make the image permanent. I moved to the last tray, pressed, beep. There was a heavy thud, a loud, mechanical clack. The door to the safe had just unlatched. Cassio didn't praise me. He just moved. He pulled the heavy door open. Inside, there wasn't gold, there wasn't cash, there was just one thing. A single, old-fashioned magnetic reel-to-reel tape, sitting in a black plastic case. A white label was stuck to it. "Orchid Dockside Accounts, Seed 7. "Seed 7, I whispered. "The hardware, that's it." "That's it," Cassio said. He reached in to take it. Ding-dong. We both froze. It was the doorbell, the cheerful, old-fashioned chime from the front of the studio. It sounded monstrous in the chemical-soaked silence. Cassio's hand closed around the tape. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He just listened. "Ding-dong. We're not expecting visitors," he said, his voice flat. He pushed me, gently, toward the back of the darkroom, where a curtained-off area led to somewhere. "Stay here." He moved out of the darkroom, into the front gallery. I crept to the edge of the door, peering through the crack. The front door was open. The gray, rain-soaked light of the alley silhouetted a figure. It was a woman. She was holding a clear umbrella. She stepped inside. shaking it off and folded it neatly. She was beautiful. Platinum blonde hair, cut into a razor-sharp bob. She wore a pristine white trench coat, not a single drop of rain on it. Her smile was bright, polite, and completely terrifying. It was a smile made of thin, sharp ice. "Mr. Vallone," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "What a pleasure. I was so hoping we'd find you here. We were delayed." "Isola," Cassio said. He sounded almost bored. "You're a long way from Federal Plaza." "Oh, business brings me where I need to be," she said, her smile widening. She was Isola Kane. The name meant nothing to me, but to Cassio, it was clearly a threat. "We," she said, gesturing to the empty, rain-filled doorway, "are here to offer a solution." "I'm not in the market for one," Cassio said. "Oh, but I think you are. You see, you have something that belongs to my employers, the FCSD, and we have something that belongs to, well, to her." She tilted her head, her smile aimed right at the darkroom door. Right at me. "Hello, Tamsin. We know you're in there." My blood turned to ice. "The deal is very simple, Isola Kane continued, clasping her hands in front of her. "You give us the tape, the Seed 7 archive, and in return, the Federal Commerce Security Directorate offers you guaranteed safety, both of you, and of course, the boy, Jem, a full, clean slate." Cassio actually laughed. It was a short, dry, mirthless sound. "Safety. Is that what you're calling it, safety? As in, no one lives to tell the story." Isola's smile finally faltered. Just for a second, the ice cracked. "Mr. Vallone, I'm trying to be civil. This is a secure federal operation." "This is a shakedown. Isola, and you're late." "Then I'm afraid the civilities are over." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She just stepped back, out of the doorway. And the FCSD came in. They weren't cops. They were soldiers, 6 of them, in black tactical gear, helmets with dark visors, carrying weapons I'd only seen in movies. They moved fast, fanning out, their boots heavy on the wooden floor. They were the men Rook had threatened me with. "Cassio!" I screamed. He was already moving. He wasn't running away from them. He was running back to me. He grabbed my arm, yanking me back into the darkroom. "The light," he yelled. He slammed his fist into the main circuit breaker box by the door. The entire studio was plunged into total blackness. The red safe light I'd found so sinister was now the only thing illuminating the world. It cast long, demonic shadows. The air was instantly thick with the smell of chemicals and adrenaline. "Back," he yelled, pushing me toward the curtained-off area. One of the soldiers burst through the door, his dark form a terrifying silhouette against the gallery light. He raised his weapon. Cassio didn't have a gun. He grabbed the first thing he could, a plastic tray of white, powdery developing chemicals from the counter. He hurled it, powder and all, into the soldier's face. The man screamed, a wet, muffled sound, dropping his weapon to claw at his eyes. "My eyes, I can't see!" Another soldier pushed him aside, coming in low. Cassio was a blur. He vaulted onto the long, stainless steel sink, his shoes slipping on the wet metal. He slid the entire length of it, moving like liquid shadow in the red light. He dropped down behind the second soldier. I saw Cassio's arm snake out. He wasn't using a napkin this time. He grabbed the thin, steel wire that was strung across the room for drying film. He looped it, pulled and twisted. The soldier made a choked, gurgling sound and went limp, subdued in a single, brutal, silent motion. It was horrifying. It was brilliant. I was clutching the tape reel to my chest, my heart feeling like it was going to explode. I was useless. I was the weak girl again, waiting to be saved. A third soldier came through. He saw Cassio standing over his subdued comrade. He raised his weapon. Cassio saw him, but he was off balance. He wouldn't make it in time. I didn't plan, I just acted. My hand was next to a shelf of supplies. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a large, 1-gallon brown glass bottle. The label read, "Stop Bath." "Hey!" I screamed. The soldier turned. I swung the bottle with all my strength. Not at his head, I just threw it. It shattered against his chest plate, a harmless explosion of glass and liquid. The sharp, vinegary smell of the acid filled the air. It didn't hurt him, but it surprised him. He stumbled back, lowering his weapon for a half second. It was all Cassio needed. He closed the distance, disarmed the man, and a single, precise blow to the temple sent him slumping to the floor. Cassio looked at me. His chest was heaving. He was breathing hard. In the red light, his face was a mask of shadows. He gave me a single, fractional nod. "The back door," he panted. "Go!" He grabbed my hand, his grip like a steel vise. He pulled me through the curtain. It wasn't a closet. It was a narrow hallway. At the end, a steel door with a panic bar. We hit it at a full run, bursting out into the alley. The rain was a physical wall of water, cold and blinding. We ran. Behind us, I heard Isola Kane's voice, clear and enraged, shouting orders. And then, another sound, a sound that wasn't the rain, wasn't the thunder. Sirens. Dozens of them. But they were wrong. They weren't Brineport police. The pitch was different. A clean, European-style woo-woo-woo, and it was coming from all directions. It was a simulated sound, a technological howl. It was the sound of the FCSD, the fake cops, closing the net. They were the wolves, and they were announcing their hunt. We just ran, disappearing into the maze of wet brick and glass. We ran. The sound of the fake sirens was a metallic shriek, echoing off the wet brick of the glass fairy alleys. It wasn't a chase, it was a net. They were everywhere, trying to flush us out. My hand was clamped in Cassio's, his grip painfully tight, pulling me through the labyrinth. He didn't run far. He yanked me sideways into a narrow gap between two buildings that smelled overwhelmingly of fish and old brine. It was a dead end. In here, he hissed. A steel door, rusted and set low in the brick. He didn't use his tools. It was unlocked. He shoved me through, into the back hallway of a commercial kitchen, and out the front door of a closed deli. The black SUV was waiting at the curb, silent and dark, the engine off. The scar-faced man was at the wheel. He started the car as we got in. He didn't ask questions. He just drove, pulling away from the curb with a terrifying, unhurried calm. He navigated the back streets of Brineport, moving away from the containment zone, never once going fast enough to draw attention. I watched the red and blue lights of the FCSD, the fake police, fade behind us, a perimeter we had simply slipped through. We drove for 10 minutes in total silence. I was still clutching the tape reel, the heavy plastic case digging into my ribs. My other hand, the one I'd thrown the bottle with, was scraped. I hadn't even noticed. We didn't go back to the church. We drove to a quiet, working-class neighborhood full of old two-story homes and corner bodegas. The scar-faced man stopped in front of a narrow storefront, Petrov's Fine Tailoring. A light was on in the window, even though it was late. "Go," Cassio said. "Don't talk to Mrs. Petrov. Just go straight up." He got out with me. The SUV pulled away and vanished around the corner. We walked to the side door, the one marked for apartments. He used a simple, modern key this time. The hallway was narrow, dark, and smelled of mothballs, old wool, and soup. We climbed 3 flights of steep, creaking stairs. At the top, a final door opened into an attic. It was a single, long room under a slanted tin roof. It was cluttered but clean bolts of fabric, old dressmaker's dummies, and in the far corner, a simple iron cot, a wooden chair, and a small sink. It was sparse, but it was warm. And it was loud. The storm that had started in Glass Ferry was a full-blown tempest now. The rain hammered on the tin roof just feet above our heads, a deafening, relentless drum roll. It wasn't a sound. It was a physical weight in the room. "It's safe," Cassio said, his voice barely audible over the roar. "Mrs. Petrov, her family owed mine. From a long time ago. No one knows this place exists." He locked the door, a heavy deadbolt sliding home with a thud. I finally let go of the tape reel. setting it on the chair as if it were a bomb. I was soaked to the bone, my thin jacket dripping puddles onto the old wooden floor. As I peeled it off, I looked at my right arm. The scrape wasn't just a scrape. A shard of glass from the bottle I'd thrown must have caught me. A shallow, 4-inch cut ran along my forearm. It was bleeding sluggishly, the blood mixing with the rainwater. Before I could say anything, Cassio saw it. He crossed the small room in 2 strides. He didn't speak. He just gestured to the cot. "Sit." I sat. He disappeared into a tiny bathroom tucked under the eaves and returned with a small, metal first aid box. He knelt in front of me. The position was jarring this powerful man, kneeling at my feet. "This will sting," he said. He took my arm. His hand was warm, his grip firm but gentle. I flinched, my muscles tensing, expecting the pain of the antiseptic. He stopped. His fingers were still on my wrist, but he didn't move. He waited. "Tamsin," he said, his voice low and steady, a counter rhythm to the rain. "I won't hurt you." He didn't look at my face. He kept his eyes on the cut, a deliberate act of respect, giving me my space even while he was touching me. His movements were meticulous. He cleaned the cut with a precise, careful touch, his fingers light. This was the same hand that had wrapped a napkin around a man's wrist and broken it, the same hand that had used a drying wire. The contrast made my head spin. When he was done, he taped a clean white gauze pad over the cut. He held my arm for a second longer than necessary, his thumb resting on the inside of my wrist, on my pulse, steadying me. Then he let go and stood up. And that's when the shaking started. It wasn't the cold, it wasn't the rain, it was the end of the adrenaline. It was the crash. The reality of the red-lit darkroom, the men in armor, the sound of the bottle shattering, the weight of the tape reel, it all came down on me at once. I threw it, I whispered, the words choking me. I was staring at the wall, at a bolt of gray wool. I threw a bottle at him. Cassio was silent. He was watching me. I couldn't finish. The tears came, hot, heavy, and humiliating. I wasn't the tough girl from the stage. I wasn't the survivor from the warehouse. I was the girl from the 3rd floor walk-up, the one with $17 and a missing brother. "I can't do this, Cassio," I sobbed, the words tearing out of me. "You don't understand. I'm not this. I'm not strong. I'm small. I've always been small. I'm the person who just wants to pay her electric bill and tell her stupid jokes. I'm weak, just like that man said at the bar. And tonight was too much." My confession hung in the air, swallowed by the roar of the storm. I was admitting defeat. I was finally, truly admitting what I'd always known. He stood by the small, rain-lashed attic window, a dark shape against the gray light. He was close, just half a step away. The small space between us vibrated with the storm. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He didn't tell me I was strong. He just accepted it. "I know," he said, his voice so quiet I had to read his lips. "And you are not required to be anything else." He paused, the rain hammering, filling the silence. "I am only here," he said, his eyes finding mine in the gloom. "If you want me to be." It was a question. It was a statement. It was a choice. He wasn't the Mafia boss. He wasn't my protector. He was just a man, standing half a step away, giving me the one thing no one else ever had the power to say no. I looked at him, at this impossible, dangerous, gentle man who had brushed dust off my shoulder and cleaned my wounds. I didn't say anything. I just took the half step. I closed the distance between us. I put my good hand, the one that wasn't bandaged, on his chest. His shirt was damp and cool, but beneath it, I felt his heart. It was beating, a slow, steady, powerful thump. He was real. He raised his hand, the one that had just patched me up. He moved with that same deliberate slowness, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His fingers touched my cheek. His thumb was rough, calloused, but it was warmer than my skin. He brushed away a tear I hadn't known had fallen. He leaned in. I met him. The first contact was just a press of lips. It was soft, hesitant, a question in the middle of a storm. It tasted of the rain and something safe. Then I leaned in, my fingers clenching his shirt, the rain on the roof, the world outside. It all just dissolved. His other hand came up, sliding into my damp hair, cupping the back of my neck. It wasn't a demanding grip, it was supportive. It was an anchor. The kiss changed. It wasn't soft anymore. It was fiery. It was a release. It was every ounce of terror from the warehouse, every spike of adrenaline from the darkroom, every moment of humiliation from the bar, all of it finally finding a place to go. It wasn't about romance. It was about surviving. My back was against the rough, unfinished wooden wall of the attic. His body was a shield, pressing against me, blocking out the world. I felt the hard, solid lines of his chest, his shoulders. He was an immovable object. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against mine. We were breathing the same air, ragged and warm. His dark eyes searched mine in the dim light, asking again, "Are you sure?" I answered by closing the small distance, my bandaged hand coming up to rest on his shoulder. This time, the kiss was deeper, slower. It was a promise. It was the end of the day. His heavy wool coat, the one that smelled like him, fell from his shoulders to the floor. My wet jacket was already on the chair. We didn't move to the cot, we just sank, down onto the old braided wool rug that covered the center of the floor, a pool of faded color in the gray room. The rain was so loud now it was a vibration, a physical presence, a roar. We just sat there for a minute, our legs tangled, listening to it. A tiny, hysterical laugh bubbled up in my chest. "It's so loud," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He smiled, a real, actual smile. It was the first one I'd ever seen. It transformed his entire face, erasing the shadows. "It's cover," he said. We lay there, not side by side, but propped up on our elbows, facing each other. The tension was gone, replaced by a strange, fragile, impossible calm. "You hate it," I said. He looked confused. "The rain?" "No, the fighting." I nodded at his hands. "Back in the darkroom. You're good at it, but you hate it." He looked down at his own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "I hate the smell," he admitted, his voice low. "The chemicals, the cordite, the smell of a gun. After," he looked at me, "it gets into the wool of your coat. You can never wash it out. It smells like a permanent mistake." This man, who lived in a world of mistakes, hated the reminder. "What about you?" he asked. "The girl who jokes about monsters. What are you really afraid of?" I didn't have to think. The answer was always right there, sitting on my chest. "Footsteps," I said, "heavy ones, walking behind me on the street when it's late. The sound of someone walking faster than me. That half second where you know they're following you, and you have to find your keys in your purse, and you have to pretend you're not scared, but they know you are." He was quiet for a long time, just watching me. The sound of the rain was the only thing in the world. "No one," he said, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name, "will ever follow you home again. Tamsin." I was so tired, a bone-deep, marrow-level exhaustion I had never felt in my life. I let my head drop, my cheek resting on the rough, scratchy wool of the rug. It was uncomfortable. I reached into the pocket of my jeans and pulled out the one thing that was still mine, the wadded-up, slightly damp linen napkin from table 7. I unfolded it. I folded it again, into a small, neat square. I put it on the rug and rested my head on it. Cassio watched me, a shadow of that smile still on his lips. "A napkin?" "It's my cape. Remember?" I mumbled, my voice already thick with sleep. "It got upgraded from a shield." He chuckled, a low, warm sound that rumbled through the floor. He lay down on his side, facing me. He didn't touch me. He just stayed. He was a solid, warm line in the dark. The world was reduced to the small, safe space between us. The storm outside was a lullaby. Tamsin, he whispered. I was already halfway gone, drifting in the first real safety I had felt in my entire life. Tomorrow. His voice was firm, pulling me back for just 1 second. We get Jem back. We'll use the tape. We'll do it the right way. He paused. As clean as possible. Clean. It sounded nice. Okay, I mumbled. I fell asleep on a borrowed floor in a borrowed attic with my head on a stolen napkin, and I wasn't afraid. I woke up to the smell of dust and old wool. For a second, I didn't know where I was. My neck was stiff, my cheek pressed against the rough fibers of the linen napkin. Then it all came back in a rush, the dark room, the sirens, Cassio. The rain had stopped. The attic was quiet. The only sound a distant, mournful foghorn from the harbor. I sat up. The heavy braided rug was an imprint of where we'd been, but the cot was empty. Cassio was already dressed, standing by the small, grimy window, looking down at the street. He'd put his overcoat back on. The night was over. The truce of the storm had ended. They're gone, he said, without turning. The FCSD. They pulled their perimeter about an hour ago. Are they looking for us? They're looking for the tape, he said. He turned, and the man from the night before, the one who had held me, who had admitted his own fears, was gone. This was Cassio Vallone, the man from table 7, all business. And they're looking for Jem. My stomach clenched. He promised, I said, my voice small. You promised we'd get him. We will, he said. He walked over to the small table where we'd left our spoils. He wasn't looking at the heavy tape reel. He was holding the negative, the one from the dark room, the Vesper blue. The light, he said. He pulled a small, powerful flashlight from his pocket and his phone. He turned the flashlight on, propped his phone up with the screen on its brightest white setting, and stretched a white plastic bag from the trash bin between them. A perfect makeshift light box. He held the negative up to it. The dark room was a rush. We missed this. He pulled a small, folding magnifying glass, a tailor's loupe, probably borrowed from Mrs. Petrov, from his pocket, and squinted at the film. What? I asked, creeping closer. There. He handed me the loupe. I looked. The image was grainy, ghostly. The massive container ship, the docks, and the tiny figures. 2 men. Walking. Between them a third, smaller figure. Hunched. His hands looked bound. Jem, I breathed. It was him? I knew the slope of his shoulders. I knew the way he walked, even when he was being dragged. They're walking him toward a container, Cassio said, his voice flat. He took the loupe back. Read the side. I squinted. The letters were stenciled in white. K-line 17B. K-line 17B, Cassio repeated, the words solidifying. The Vesper blue. The night he vanished. This is the proof. This is what the Aegis agent at the studio was documenting. He carefully put the negative down. He picked up the tape reel. Seed 7, proof of payment. This, he tapped the negative, is the proof of delivery. Jem wasn't just a thief. He walked in on the transaction. He didn't just steal the key. He became the evidence. He looked at me, his eyes dark. We need to know exactly what this tape unlocks, and we need to know who else wants it. He pulled out the old, non-smart burner phone he'd used before. He dialed a number from memory. He only spoke a few words. His voice was different, colder. The voice he'd used on Rook, Pike, Vallone. I have an Aegis artifact. I need an appraisal. He listened. Good, Rook's loop, 1 hour. He hung up. Who is Arden Pike? I asked, gathering my still damp jacket. He was the chief archivist for Aegis Bureau, Cassio said, slipping the tape reel into a simple canvas bag. When Aegis imploded, he was the one who supposedly deleted the archives. Instead, he became a librarian for ghosts. He sells access, information leverage. He's not loyal to anyone but the highest bidder. And you're going to be the highest bidder. He thinks so, Cassio said. He just confirmed what I suspected. Seed 7 isn't just a ledger. It's the master payment ledger for all of Orchid Tier. Every dirty cop, every judge, every alliance payment, it's the key to their entire shadow operation. And we're just going to meet him with the tape. We are, he said. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. No, I'm coming with you. He turned, his expression unreadable. Tamsin, this is not the dark room. This is a transaction. It will be dangerous. Jem is my brother, I said, and the words felt stronger than they had yesterday. That tape is the only thing I have that can save him. I'm not the girl who hides in the attic anymore. Cassio, you said it yourself. I'm undefended. Well, you're defending me. So let's go. He studied my face for a long moment. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, but an acknowledgement. All right, Wink, let's go. Rook's Loop was a concrete graveyard. It was an abandoned skate park from the 80s, built near the refinery. Back when the city still pretended to care about its youth, now it was just 3 massive, empty concrete bowls, covered in layers of graffiti, smelling of sulfur and stagnant water. The black SUV dropped us a block away and vanished. Cassio's men were nowhere, but the air felt heavy, watched. Cassio was calm. He carried the canvas bag with the tape reel. He walked into the center of the biggest bowl, the one shaped like a dried-up kidney. A man scrambled out from behind a busted half-pipe. He was the opposite of Cassio. He was thin, jittery, wearing a stained windbreaker and glasses so thick they distorted his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't seen the sun in a decade. This was Arden Pike, the ghost librarian. "Vallone," he squeaked, wiping his damp palms on his pants. You came, and you brought the collateral. Oh, my." His magnified eyes slid over to me. "And her? Good. Isola Kane is very interested in your associate." My blood chilled. Isola. "The tape. Arden," Cassio said, his voice echoing slightly in the concrete bowl. "What does it open?" "Oh, everything. Arden said, his eyes glued to the bag in Cassio's hand. "It's the jackpot. Mr. Vallone, it's the Orchid Ledger. It's beautiful. Let me see it. I just need to verify the casing, the serial number." He reached out, his thin, pale fingers grasping for the bag. Cassio didn't move. He just let the bag hang from his hand, just out of Arden's reach. "You're wearing a wire, Arden," Cassio said. The words were quiet, but they hit the concrete bowl like a gunshot. Arden Pike froze. Every drop of blood drained from his face. "What? That's crazy. I don't—" "The collar of your windbreaker," Cassio said, his voice bored. "The microphone head. It's tiny, but it's reflecting off the lens of your glasses every time you turn your head. It's sloppy." I backed up a step. This wasn't a meeting. It was a trap. "No, wait, you don't understand," Arden shrieked, his voice cracking. "They made me, the FCSD Isola. She has leverage on me. She just wanted to talk. She's on her way here right now. It's a misunderstanding." "She's not on her way," Cassio said, his voice cutting through the man's panic like ice. "She sent you to stall, to confirm I had the genuine tape. The real trap is the FCSD tactical team she has waiting on the rooftops of those warehouses. They're waiting for your signal." No. "You've got it all wrong." Arden was practically dancing with terror. "She doesn't even want the tape right now. She's using it. She's using the promise of it for a different deal." Cassio tilted his head. "What deal?" "The deal with the Night Harbor Alliance!" Arden screamed, the words tumbling out in a desperate, unstoppable rush. "She has to trade the boy, your girl's brother, to the Alliance. It's her buy-in to get the rest of the Aegis keys. She's holding him on the Sun Barrel Bell, the old tourist ferry. They're doing the exchange tonight at Hollow Inlet. She's trading the boy for oh, God." He clapped his hands over his mouth, his wide, terrified eyes staring at us. He had said it. He had said it all. The skate park was dead silent, save for the distant hiss of the refinery. Cassio just stood there. He didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Arden. He slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his old, battered burner phone. He pressed a single button on the side. And Arden's voice, high and reedy, played back from the small speaker, holding him on the Sunbarrel Bell, the old tourist ferry. They're doing the exchange tonight at Hollow Inlet. He had been recording the entire time. Arden Pike looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at Cassio, and I saw a new kind of terror in his eyes. It wasn't the fear of a man who'd been caught. It was the absolute soul-crushing terror of a mouse realizing the cat it was trying to trap was, in fact, a dragon. He wasn't afraid Cassio would hurt him. He was afraid of what Cassio was. "Thank you, Arden," Cassio said, slipping the phone back into his pocket. "You've been very helpful. You've saved us a great deal of time." "Please," Arden whispered. "Go," Cassio said. "Run back to your masters. Tell Isola I'm considering her offer. Tell her I need time to think. It might buy us an hour." Arden didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled up the side of the concrete bowl and ran, disappearing into the weeds. We were alone. The wind picked up, whistling through the empty park. "So," I said, my voice shaking, "Jem, he's on a boat, tonight." "Yes," Cassio said. He was already walking toward the street. "We're targets," I said, following him, of everyone, the FCSD, the Alliance, Orchid Tier." "Yes." The black SUV reappeared as if summoned from the pavement. We got in. The scar-faced driver pulled away, silent as a ghost. I was clutching the canvas bag. The tape reel was heavy on my lap. Jem was alive, but he was a piece of merchandise, a bargaining chip. "Well, we can't just storm the boat. Cassio," I said, the words coming fast. My brain felt like it was finally catching up, moving as fast as his. If they see us coming, they'll just get rid of him. The witness, the loose end." "We won't storm it," he said, his eyes on the passing warehouses. "We have to go public," I said. He turned, surprised. "What?" "The tape, the ledger. Arden said it's everything. Let's release it. Give it to the newspapers. The real feds. Everyone. Let's drag them all into the light. It's the only way." "And the second we do," Cassio said, his voice flat, "Isola Kane executes your brother, and the Alliance comes for us. We can't just dump the data. Tamsin, we have to protect the witnesses. You, Jem, me." He was right. I deflated. "So what do we do?" "We stage a play," he said, a ghost of last night's smile on his face. I looked at him. A play. A deception. Isola wants the tape. Rook wants the tape. The Alliance wants Jem. Everyone is trying to betray everyone else, so we betray them first. My mind was racing. This was a script, a performance. Okay, I said. "So we don't give them the real tape. We give them a dummy, a copy." "Exactly," Cassio said, his eyes lighting up. "We can't read the data without the hardware, but we can copy the magnetic signature. We can make a physical duplicate." "But a duplicate isn't enough," I said, building on it. "It has to be a trap. A tracker, right, like in the movies." "Better," he said. "We embed a digital marker in the data stream of the copy, a seed of our own. When Isola, or whoever she hands it to, loads that tape onto their server, it won't show them the ledger. It will ping us. It will activate. It will trace the signal back to its source. It won't just tell us who she is. It will tell us where she is, the real end user." "It's a performance," I whispered. "The plan forming, sharp and clear. A heist. We don't go in with guns. We go in with a script. We have to get Jem off that boat while Isola thinks she's about to get her prize. We have to make our lie more believable than theirs." I looked at Cassio. I was terrified. My hands were shaking again, but it was a different kind of shaking. It wasn't the vibration of a victim. It was the low, humming frequency of a performer, waiting in the wings. Cassio was watching me, his expression one I hadn't seen before. It was admiration. "A stage play," he said, nodding slowly, "written by Tamsin Reed." "I'm not the girl who waits in the attic," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm the one who writes the ending." The Baylight Arcade revival was a sensory assault. It was a temporary, desperate party thrown on the edge of the canal, a city-sponsored attempt to prove Brineport wasn't just a graveyard for container ships. Neon lights bled onto the wet pavement. The air was thick with the smells of popcorn, ozone, and the chemical sweetness of cotton candy. Music from 3 different rides clashed, creating a wall of tinny, chaotic sound. It was the perfect place to get lost. It was also the perfect place to hide in plain sight. "He's here," Cassio's voice said, low and calm in my ear. I was wearing a tiny, skin-colored earpiece. Gray jacket, blue baseball cap. By the ring toss, he's FCSD. Plain clothes, he's her perimeter. I adjusted the ridiculously bright yellow visor on my head. My flimsy apron was stuffed with fluorescent pink flyers. Baylight Arcade Revival 2-for-1 Ferris wheel rides. I was Tamsin Reed, minimum wage employee. I was invisible. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the thumping bass of the gravitron. I see him. The man looked bored. He was trying to look like a local, but his jacket was too clean, his posture too rigid. He was watching the crowd, his eyes scanning, methodical. He was security. "He's moving," Cassio said, "toward the funnel cake stand. Tamsin, now." This was my part of the script. My hand went into my apron pocket, past the flyers, to the thing Cassio had given me. It was a tracking tag, the size of a quarter, with a micro-adhesive backing. I stepped into the flow of the crowd, a stupid, bright smile plastered on my face. Flyer, Sir 2-for-1 rides. I moved toward the FCSD man. He saw me coming and held up a hand, annoyed. "Not interested, kid." "Just take it," I said, my voice high and cheerful. I tripped on a loose cable, stumbling forward, my handful of flyers scattering. I bumped into him, my body colliding with his left side. "Hey, watch it," he snapped. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," I said, bending to grab the flyers at his feet. In that 1 second of contact, my left hand, the one holding the tag, had pressed firmly against the back of his gray jacket, right at the waistline. My right hand had scattered the flyers as a distraction. I stood up, clutching the papers. "So sorry, sir. Have a great night." I hurried away, my heart in my throat, melting back into the crowd of teenagers and families. I didn't look back. "Done," I whispered. "Good," Cassio's voice replied. The line went silent for a moment. "My turn. I'm at the bridge. Nava is here. Go to the north end of the inlet. Service Pier 4. 20 minutes. The line clicked dead. He was gone. He was going to get our escape route. I knew the story he'd fed me. He was meeting a man named Nava Cruz, a deckhand. Someone who operated in the shadows of the port, an independent contractor who hated the Alliance and the FCSD more than he cared about the law. Cassio was trading a favor, or cash, for a small, silent boat to be waiting for us under the crumbling, broken arches of the old verdigris bridge. I dumped my flyers and my visor in a trash can and started walking, my hands stuffed in my pockets. I was just a girl, walking by the water. Hollow Inlet was where the canal died. The Sun Barrel Bell was moored there, a fat, 3-tiered ghost, in its prime. It had been a gaudy yellow and white tourist ferry, taking families on 30-minute tours of the harbor. Now, it was dark, save for a few dim utility lights. It was Isola's private, floating fortress. I found Cassio near Service Pier 4, a row of rotting wooden pylons. He was just a shadow, emerging from other shadows. He was carrying a small, waterproof duffel bag. "The tracker's active," he said, holding up his phone. A single, blinking dot was moving just outside the arcade grounds. "He's in position. Let's go." He led me not to a boat, but to the base of the pier where the Sun Barrel Bell was tied. The service ladder, aft. We moved like ghosts, our sneakers silent on the wet wood. The ladder was cold, slick steel. Cassio went first, I followed, the bag with the dummy tape reel our Trojan horse slung over my shoulder. We landed on the lowest deck, a steel-plated service area that smelled of diesel and rust. It was empty. "Server room is midship, 1 deck up," Cassio whispered. "Jem will be in crew holds or event spaces. They'll keep him isolated. That's up 2 decks. A single security camera, mounted high on the bulkhead, swept the corridor in front of us. It moved with a slow, predictable rhythm, left, right, a 5-second pause at each end. "We have 4 seconds to cross that hall." I breathed. "We don't need 4, Cassio said. He opened the duffel bag. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a photograph, a large, high-resolution, 11 by 14 print. I looked at it, confused. It was a picture of nothing, just the far wall of the corridor, the exact same color, the exact same rust stains. "It pans right, then left," he whispered, watching the camera's motion. "When it hits the far right, it pauses. I'll hold this up. It will be looking at a picture of what it's supposed to be looking at. It won't see us move behind it. Go." The camera swiveled right. Thwack, it stopped. "Now," Cassio ordered. He stepped out, holding the photograph up. His arms braced, his body hidden perfectly behind it. He was a piece of the wall. I ran. I sprinted across the 10 feet of open, exposed corridor, my heart in my mouth, and ducked into the stairwell on the other side. I looked back. The camera started to pan left. Cassio folded the photo in half, stepped back, and followed me into the stairwell, all in one fluid, invisible motion. My jaw was open. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Old magic trick," he said, no humor in his voice. "This way." We went up one flight. "Server room," he said, pointing down a hall. "I plant the seed. You find your brother. Event hall. End of this corridor. Go." He didn't wait for a reply. He was gone. A shadow moving toward the ship's electronic heart. I was alone. My hands were shaking. I ran down the hall, my feet silent on the cheap industrial carpet. The door at the end was marked Sunset Lounge. It was locked. A digital keypad, but not with numbers. It was a set of 4 blank, black pads, a rhythm lock. My blood ran cold. A code. I didn't have a code. I stared at it, my mind racing. Jem. I thought of him, not the scared, dragged figure in the negative, but Jem at 10, Jem at 12, Jem at our tiny kitchen table, driving me insane. He was always tapping, always. Rhythms he'd heard, beats he'd made up. There was one, a simple, stupid one, from an old video game we both loved. He tapped it on everything. His textbooks, the dashboard of my car, the dinner table. Tap, 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 tap. My fingers were trembling. I reached out, I tapped the blank pads. Short, short, long, short, short, short. There was a loud click. The light on the handle turned green. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, but a sliver of moonlight from a porthole cut across the floor. The room was full of stacked chairs and overturned tables. And in the far corner, a figure, sitting on the floor, his knees drawn to his chest. "Jem," I whispered. He flinched, scrambling backward, his eyes wide with terror. Who's there, please? I don't know anything else. I swear." "Jem, it's me, it's Tamsin." I ran to him, skidding on my knees. He was thin, thinner than I'd ever seen him. His face was pale, bruised along one cheek, but he was alive. "Tamsy!" he choked out. He grabbed me, his fingers digging into my arms like claws. "Oh God, Tamsy, I'm so sorry. I messed up. I messed up so bad. They were going to, I didn't know what to do." He was sobbing, his whole body shaking, burying his face in my shoulder. The weak girl from the Salt Lark, the one who always flinched, was gone. I wrapped my arms around my little brother. I held him tight. I was the anchor. "It's okay," I said, my voice firm, my own fear banished by his. "I know. I'm here now. We're going home. Right now. Can you walk?" I think so." I pulled him to his feet. He was weak, unsteady, but he was mine. I got my earpiece back in. "Cassio, I have him. I have Jem." Silence. Then his voice, calm as ever. "Good. The seed is planted. The dummy is in their system, waiting to be copied. Meet me on the main deck, aft. We're leaving." "We're on our way?" I pulled Jem toward the door. "We have to be quiet," I said. "We're not out yet." We got to the main stairwell and headed up. The main deck, the alarm hadn't gone off. We were going to make it. We stepped out onto the open-air deck. It was a dance floor, a DJ booth in one corner, strings of dead party lights crisscrossing above us. Cassio was waiting by the stern railing, a dark silhouette against the lights of Brineport. And then every light on the ship flashed on at once. Klaxon! 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 An alarm blared, a deafening, pulsing sound. The party lights flashed red, blue, green, red turning the deck into a disorienting, strobing nightmare. They found the server breach, Cassio yelled over the noise. Doors burst open on either side of the deck. FCSD soldiers, at least 4 of them, in their black armor, fanning out, their weapons raised. Isola, one of them shouted, "They're on the aft deck!" Jem screamed and crumpled, pulling me down. "Move!" Cassio roared. He didn't run. He grabbed a heavy, coiled rope from the deck and hurled it at the closest soldier, knocking him off balance. He ran to the DJ booth. The soldiers were advancing, the strobing lights making them look like jerky, terrifying animations. "Get to the rail," Cassio yelled at me. "Get Jem to the rail!" I dragged Jem, pulling him behind a stack of plastic lounge chairs. A shot rang out, a sharp crack that was different from the alarm. A chunk of the chair I was hiding behind exploded. Cassio was at the booth. He wasn't looking for a weapon. He slammed his fist onto a console. "Eh!" A thick, billowing cloud of white smoke erupted from the fog machine, instantly blanketing the dance floor. The flashing LEDs refracted through it, creating a blinding, chaotic maze of color and shadow. "I can't see them," a soldier yelled. "Jem, now run," I screamed, pulling my brother toward the railing where Cassio had been. Another shot. It came from our right. The soldier had seen our movement. He was raising his rifle, aiming right at me. I froze. I was a deer in headlights, the weak girl. A black shape tackled me from the side. It was Cassio. He slammed into me and Jem, knocking us both flat to the deck, shielding us with his own body. The bullet pinged off the steel railing where I had just been standing. "The lights," he roared. He wasn't talking to me. He had his own weapon now, a handgun I hadn't even seen him draw. He didn't aim at the men. He aimed up. Crack, crack, crack. He fired 3 times, not at the soldiers, but at the main power box for the LED grid above us. The flashing lights exploded in a shower of sparks. The entire deck was plunged into near total darkness, the only light coming from the distant, indifferent glow of the city. The fog was everywhere. The alarm was still screaming. "The boat is below," Cassio yelled, grabbing the front of my jacket. "Nava is here. You have to jump. Go." He shoved Jem toward the railing. "Go! Jem, jump!" Jem, galvanized by pure terror, scrambled over the rail and disappeared into the blackness. I hesitated. It was a 3-story drop into dark water. "Tamsin, jump!" Cassio yelled. He grabbed me. "Are you?" "Go." He didn't wait. He grabbed my waist, put his other hand on the rail, and just vaulted. He took me with him. We hit the air. It was a terrifying, breathless second of absolute silence. The wind rushed past my ears. The ship, with its wailing alarm and shouting men, was suddenly above me. Then the cold hit. We plunged into the black, icy water of Hollow Inlet. It was a thermal shock, driving the air from my lungs. I panicked, my wet clothes dragging me down. A second later, a hand grabbed my jacket, strong and sure. It was Cassio, treading water, already looking for the exit. Here, a voice hissed. A small, black inflatable boat, its engine off, glided out from under the shadow of the pier. A thin, weathered man was at the tiller, Nava Cruz. Cassio shoved me toward the boat. Nava's strong, wiry arms hauled me over the side like a sack of fish. I collapsed onto the rubber floor, coughing up salt water. Jem was already there, huddled and shaking. Cassio hauled himself in, a single, powerful motion. "Go," he said to Nava. Nava didn't speak. He twisted a small handle, and a tiny, almost silent electric motor hummed to life. We slid away, a shadow moving through other shadows, disappearing under the verdigris bridge. I looked back one time. The Sunbarrel Bell was lit up like a floating city on fire. Every light was on. Searchlights swept the black water. The alarm echoed across the inlet. They were looking for us, but we were already gone. We were a ghost heading for the shore, and Isola Kane was about to open her present. Nava Cruz dumped us at a place called the Mariner's Rest, which was neither restful nor anywhere near the actual marina. It was a $20 a night motel squatting by the freeway, a place where the neon sign hummed a desperate, failing tune. The air smelled of diesel, damp carpet, and bleach. "It's anonymous," Nava had grunted, his face a mask of shadows. "Pay by the hour, no cameras, no questions." Cassio pressed a thick wad of cash into his hand. "Thank you, Nava." Nava just nodded, his eyes on me and Jem. "Good luck, kids. You'll need it." He slipped back into his silent, inflatable boat and was gone, vanishing into the canal system like a water rat. We were alone, the three of us. Room 11. The key was a physical key. Cassio turned the lock, and we stepped inside. It was a green and brown box of despair, 2 lumpy beds, 1 flickering fluorescent light in the tiny bathroom. Jem immediately went to the corner by the rattling air conditioner and huddled. He was still shaking, his body vibrating with cold and terror. I grabbed the only 2 towels in the bathroom, thin, stained, and smelling of more bleach, and wrapped one around his shoulders. I used the other to dry my own hair, my bandaged arm throbbing. Cassio stood by the door, listening. He was a statue, his senses extended, tasting the air for threats. He was still dry. The water seemed to flee from his expensive coat. After a full minute, he turned and slid the chain lock into place. It felt like a useless, tiny gesture. "Tamsy?" Jem's voice was a croak. He was staring at the floor. You have to know." "Jem, not now," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "We're safe. We just need to breathe." "No," he said, his voice gaining a frantic edge. "You think I'm just stupid. You think I gambled it all away again. But it wasn't just that." I looked at Cassio, and he was watching Jem, his expression unreadable, but his attention was total. I owed them, Tamsy," Jem confessed, the words spilling out in a rush. "About 20,000. I was so scared, and they came to me. Not the loan sharks, them, the FCSD, Rook, Isola Kane." My blood went cold. They said they'd wipe the debt. They said all I had to do was use my technical skills. They knew I'd worked for that port logistics company for 6 months. They said I just had to get into the old server room, the one by the Vesper Blue, and retrieve a package, a lost piece of hardware. Seed 7, so Cassio said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Jem choked, tears welling. I thought it was just, I don't know, a corporate thing, so I did it. I got the hardware, the tape, but when I got back, Rook was there, and they had the tape and the negative, the picture. They said I was a witness, that I'd seen the transaction, and then they told me the truth." He looked up, his eyes wide and full of a terror I'd never seen before. "They told me the debt wasn't cleared, it was just transferred to them. And they said if I didn't do everything they said, if I didn't become their technical guy, their inside man, they would frame me." "Frame you," I whispered. "They said they'd plant evidence, say I was a port terrorist, say I was trying to sabotage the shipping lanes. They said I'd get life. Tamsy, I was so scared." This was it. This was the key. My brother wasn't just a reckless gambler. He was a victim. He was a pawn. He had been coerced. A white-hot, pure steel rage, an emotion I had never felt in my entire weak-kneed life, surged through me. I stood up. I wasn't cold anymore. I was burning. I turned to Cassio. "That's it." He raised an eyebrow. "We're done. We're done with your shadows, your safe houses, your clean plans. We're burning them to the ground tonight." "Tamsin, be calm," he said, his voice low. "I am calm," I snapped. We have the real tape, the ledger, the truth. We are walking out of this motel, and we are giving it to the Brineport Gazette, to the national news, to everyone. We are putting that tape and that negative of Jem on every television screen in America. We're dragging Isola and the FCSD and the whole damned alliance into the light. No. The word was flat, absolute. It stopped me cold. What do you mean, no? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I mean, no, he repeated, stepping away from the door, into the center of the wretched room. That's a straight-out move. It's the civilian move, and it's suicide. It's justice, I shot back. It's a death sentence, he countered, his voice rising for the first time. Do you have any idea what happens? The second that tape hits the web, before one single reporter can even begin to verify it, before it's anything but a crazy story, Isola and the Alliance will have one single, unified goal, not to hide, but to erase the witnesses. He took a step toward me. That's you, that's Jem, that's me, that's Nava Cruz, that's Mick Darrow at the Salt Lark. They will clean the slate, they will send men like Rook, and worse, and they will tear this city apart until we are all silent. We would be dead before the 6 o'clock news. So what? I was trembling. The rage and the fear at war. What's your plan? The Mafia boss plan. You keep it, don't you? You hold on to that tape, that ledger, and you use it. You use it as leverage. You blackmail the Alliance. You become them. The accusation hung in the air. It was ugly. And I saw, for a flash, that it had hit him. I keep us alive, he said, his voice a low growl. I use it to dismantle them, piece by piece. From the inside, I use it to guarantee your brother's safety, not just hope for it. You're in my world now, Tamsin. You have to play by the rules that exist. I am not in your world, Cassio, I was shouting now. You dragged me into it at table 7. You protected me, and you made me feel. But I am not one of your things. Jem is not a pawn. We are not leverage. We are people. BZT, BZT. The sound was alien. It was Cassio's burner phone, on the nightstand. We both froze. The fight, the words, everything evaporated. We stared at the phone as it vibrated against the cheap laminate. Slowly, Cassio picked it up. He read the screen. His entire body went still. That awful, profound stillness I'd seen in the church. What? I whispered. He held the phone out. I read the text. An unknown number. Fake tape was cute. We know you have the boy. Let's trade. Jem's life for the real Seed 7. Silex Skate Park. 11 o'clock. Come alone or he's the first to go. My legs gave out. I sat on the bed. They know, I said, my voice dead. The dummy tape. It worked. It told them it was fake. It told them we're a threat. Cassio said he was already slipping the real tape reel, which he'd had in his own bag the whole time, back into his coat. He checked his handgun, the one I'd seen on the boat. The click of the slide was the loudest sound in the world. Jem, he said, not looking at him, stay in this room. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Lock it behind me. Put the dresser in front of it. He started for the door. What are you doing? I said. I'm going, he said, alone. I was off the bed in a flash, blocking his path, my hands on his chest. No, absolutely not. You are not. Tamsin, move, he said. His voice was cold. It was the voice from the warehouse. No, I shoved him, a useless gesture against his solid frame. You're not going alone. That's what they want. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap, he said, his dark eyes boring into me. It's a trap I'm walking into. It's the only way to control the board. Now move. Your job is to protect your brother. My job? I was shaking with a new kind of fury. You think my job is to hide to be the weak girl you have to save? I am in this. Cassio, I am not leaving you. I won't. I'm weak, I am, but I am not leaving you behind. I'm doing this for you, he snarled, grabbing my arms. His grip was steel. I'm trying to keep you out of it. I am trying to protect you. And what if I don't want that? I cried, the words tearing out of my heart. What if I'm tired of being protected? You're afraid I'll get hurt. That's it, isn't it? You're afraid I can't handle it. Yes, he roared, his face inches from mine. I am. And what about you? I shot back, the tears streaming down my face. You're afraid, too. You're afraid that I think you're just like them. You're afraid you'll make the trade, that you'll give them the tape, and leave me and Jem behind to save yourself. You're afraid I'll think you forgot I was worth saving, too. The words hit him like a physical blow. His grip loosened, his eyes, the mask shattered. He saw me. He saw the truth in what I'd said. The rage was gone, from both of us, replaced by a terrible, brittle understanding. I won't, he whispered. Tamsin, I won't. Then we go, I said, my voice just as quiet. Not your protector. Not my boss, allies, you and me. We go. We end this. We do it our way. Not just yours. Not just mine. He stared at me for a long, heavy beat. The freeway traffic outside was a distant river. He let me go. He nodded. Once. Allies. He turned to his duffel bag. He pulled out a thin, silver chain. On it was a small, flat, black pendant. Jem, he said. Jem, who had been watching this all unfold in mute terror, flinched. You stay. You lock that door. We'll be back for you. He handed the chain to me. Put this on. I fumbled with the clasp, my fingers still shaking. I got it around my neck. The pendant was cold against my skin. Silex Skate Park, Sue, he said. That's Rook's Loop, where we met Pike. They're reusing the location. They're arrogant. Or it's a trap, I said. It's always a trap, he said. If we get separated, if they take you, you press the center of that hard. For 2 seconds, it has a micro-transmitter. It sends a distress signal to my men. They're already in the city. I touched the pendant. My fingers brushed the linen napkin, which I'd stuffed back into my pocket after I'd woken up. Is this an upgrade from the Table 7 napkin, I asked, my voice trembling, trying for a joke. He almost smiled. It's more reliable. The napkin is for show. He stood in front of me, by the door. The moment was heavy. There was no after this. There was no tomorrow. There was only the ugly, buzzing light of the motel room and the task ahead. Tamsin, and he said. He leaned in. He kissed me. It was nothing like the attic. That had been a discovery, a relief. This was a claiming. It was short, hard, and deep. It was desperate. It was a promise and a goodbye. All at once, it said. I will kill them all to get back to you. He pulled away. His eyes were black iron. Let's go. Silex Skate Park was where concrete went to die. We left the black SUV 2 blocks away, moving on foot, shadows in a neighborhood of shadows. The park. Rook's Loop was exactly as I remembered it from the disastrous meeting with Arden Pike. It was a series of massive, empty concrete bowls, like craters on a dead moon. It overlooked the Brineport shipbreaking yard, a skeletal graveyard of rusted, half-dismantled ships. The only light came from a row of tall sodium lamps that cast a sickly, buzzing, yellow-orange glow over everything. It was a light that made everyone look diseased. And they were already here. Isola Kane stood in the center of the deepest bowl, a queen in her ruined court. She was flanked by at least 8 soldiers. They weren't wearing the black FCSD tactical gear from the boat. They were in sterile gray and blue uniforms, the kind private security wears. It was a costume, plausible deniability. And standing next to her, his arm in a sling, his head wrapped in a white bandage that was already seeping with sweat and grime, was Rook. His eyes, fixed on Cassio, were pits of pure, undiluted hatred. Between 2 of the soldiers, I saw him. Jem. My breath hitched. He was gagged, his hands bound, his eyes were wide with a terror so profound it looked like paralysis. My mind screamed how we'd left him in the motel, the chain on the door, the dresser, how had they gotten him? Had they followed us? Had they been waiting? The text message. We know you have the boy. It wasn't a bluff. It was a fact. They had been 1 step ahead of us the entire time. Don't. Cassio's voice was a low breath next to my ear. He felt my tension. "This is the script. We play our parts." I had the real tape, Seed 7, in a canvas bag. The tape reel felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Cassio and I had spent the last hour in a warehouse belonging to his scar-faced bodyguard, using specialized equipment to implant the seed, the tracker, the software bomb. It was a ghost in the machine. "Tamsin Reed," Isola's voice chimed, sharp and clear in the cold air. She smiled, that awful, thin, ice-blade smile. "The little clown from the Salt Lark? You've had a very busy few days. I'm so glad you decided to come." "Let him go," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised. It was cold. "Of course," Isola said. "The deal was simple. The artifact for the liability. Bring me the tape." "I go with her," Cassio said, stepping forward. "No," Isola snapped. "She comes alone, or Rook gets to repay you for his arm, starting with the boy." Rook grinned, a horrible, broken expression, and put his good hand on Jem's shoulder. Cassio looked at me. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were screaming. "Stick to the plan! You can do this!" I nodded. "Once?" I took the canvas bag from him. "It's okay," I whispered, "for him as much as for me. I'm not weak." I walked down the concrete slope into the yellow light. My footsteps echoed, the only sound besides the distant hiss of the refinery. I felt it then. The red dot. A tiny, precise, ruby-red circle of light, crawling over my jacket, settling on my chest. A sniper. I stopped. I didn't dare breathe. "Don't stop, Tamsin," Isola called, her voice full of false cheer. "A little insurance to make sure your associate behaves. Now, the tape." I walked the final 20 feet. I stood in front of her. I could smell her perfume, something cold and floral. I held out the bag. She took it. She opened it, looked inside, and her smile became genuine. It was terrifying. "Seed 7, she breathed. It's real." She turned to Rook. "Release the boy." Rook shoved Jem so hard he stumbled and fell to his knees. I rushed forward, grabbing his arm, pulling him up. Jem, it's okay." I tore the gag from his mouth. He was sobbing, incoherent. Tamsy. "Thank you, little clown," Isola said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your part in this is over." She was looking over my shoulder, at Cassio. The red dot, it wasn't on me anymore. It was moving. It was crawling up the opposite side of the bowl, settling on Cassio's chest. "Cassio," I screamed. I didn't need to. He'd been watching the crane, the one in the shipyard, 100 yards away. He'd seen the glint of the scope. He wasn't looking at the sniper. He was looking at me. As Isola gave the signal, as the red dot flared, Cassio didn't dive for cover. He launched himself. He moved, covering the distance between us in a way that didn't seem human. He hit me like a linebacker, a full-body tackle. Down he roared. The world exploded. The crack of the sniper rifle echoed, a flat, hard sound. A chip of concrete exploded where I had been standing, and then every one of Isola's security guards opened fire. The skate park erupted in a war zone of muzzle flashes and the percussive, deafening bang, bang, bang of automatic weapons. Cassio had me shielded, his body covering mine, pushing me behind a concrete ramp. "The pendant," he yelled. "Press it now." I fumbled inside my shirt, my fingers finding the cold metal. I pressed it, holding it down. 1, 2. "Jem!" I screamed, looking back. My brother was frozen, caught in the open in the nightmarish crossfire. A soldier was turning, leveling his weapon right at him. "No." And then a new voice. "Get down, kid." A figure I didn't recognize. A man in a dark watch cap and a heavy pea coat burst from the shadows behind a rusted-out dumpster. He tackled Jem, a clean, professional roll, pulling him out of the line of fire and behind the safety of a concrete wall. I stared. I knew him. It was Mick Darrow, my boss, the owner of the Salt Lark. "Mick." "Stay down, Tamsin," he yelled back. His voice no longer the mild-mannered bartender, but something hard and practiced. Rook wasn't firing a gun. He was ignoring the firefight. He was charging, his one good arm outstretched, screaming my name. His face was a mask of pure, murderous rage. He was coming for me. Cassio was on his feet in an instant, pushing me behind him. He met Rook's charge. It was a clash of styles. Rook was a brute, a brawler, all rage and strength. Cassio was water. He used Rook's own momentum, redirecting the charge, his hand snaking out. It wasn't a punch. He grabbed the sling on Rook's injured arm and pulled. Rook screamed, a high, thin sound of agony as his dislocated shoulder was torn. He stumbled. Cassio was on his back in a second. He wasn't using a weapon. His arm was around Rook's neck, a perfect, blood-restricting chokehold. He squeezed. Rook bucked, his good hand flailing, useless. Cassio leaned in, his mouth at Rook's ear. He didn't yell. He whispered, the words lost in the gunfire, but I knew them. No one touches her. He held the hold, not to kill, but to incapacitate. Rook's body went limp. Cassio dropped him, a discarded, unconscious heap, and grabbed his sidearm. He was back in the fight. Isola, one of her men, yelled, staring at a tablet. The tape, it's a trap. The file, it's broadcasting. We're live. Isola Kane's head snapped up. She looked past the skate park, toward the city. The Baylight Bridge, its massive LED billboards, the ones that usually advertise soda and tourism, were flickering. And then they lit up. It wasn't an ad, it was a ledger. It was our ledger. The trapped file had worked. It was transmitting. Names, account numbers, payment routes, Orchid Tier FCSD payments, NH, Alliance, the entire shadow government of Brineport, scrolling for the entire city to see. Mick Darrow saw it too, let out a low whistle. He did it. The old man's kid actually did it. You know him, I yelled, huddled behind the concrete. I was Aegis, Tamsin, Mick shouted back, pulling Jem closer. Port Recon. Cassio's father saved my life. Twice I've been watching his kid and you ever since that night at the Lark. Isola Kane's face was no longer calm. It was a rictus of pure, distilled panic. She wasn't just a criminal. She was a public spectacle. She was finished, and she knew it. No, she shrieked, her voice tearing through the night. No witnesses, no evidence, burn it all. She wasn't talking to her men. She was screaming into a radio. Protocol scorch now, fire on the archive, fire on everything. I heard it before I saw it, a new sound, the high-pitched whine of a powerful marine engine. From the shipyard, a sleek, black speedboat, a high-speed interceptor, was racing toward the inlet, its bow aimed right at us. Cassio, I screamed. A boat! On its bow was a mounted weapon. It wasn't a gun. Flare, Cassio yelled, his eyes wide. Phosphorus, they're going to burn the entire park. The boat fired. A single white projectile shot into the air, arcing over us and exploded. It wasn't a flare for light. It was an incendiary shell. It hit the ground 20 feet away, and the world became white, burning fire. The concrete itself seemed to ignite. The heat was a physical blow, a solid wall of incineration. Move, Cassio grabbed me, pulling me away from the blast zone. We were running, scrambling up the side of the concrete bowl, toward the edge of the park that overlooked the shipyard. Another shell hit. This one was closer. It struck the lip of the concrete right in front of us. The explosion threw me backward. I slammed into the ground, my head hitting the concrete, stars erupting behind my eyes. I felt a blinding, searing pain. Cassio. He had thrown himself over me. He had taken the full force of the concussion, the shrapnel from the concrete. He grunted a deep, pained sound. He was on top of me, his body a dead weight. Cassio, I pushed. Cassio, get up. He rolled off me, his face pale, his teeth gritted. His entire left side was dark, wet. I'm okay, he gasped, but he wasn't. He was bleeding, badly. The boat was firing again, blanketing the park in fire and smoke. The concrete edge we were on had cracked. It gave way. We were falling. It was only 10 feet, down to a lower service ledge, but we landed hard, a painful jolt of bone on concrete. I was fine, but Cassio. He'd landed on his injured side. He slid, his body scraping on the edge of the ledge, over the sheer drop into the ship-breaking yard below. Cassio. I grabbed him. I caught his right hand, his good one. He was dangling, suspended over a 50-foot drop onto a mountain of rusted, jagged steel. My arm was on fire, my shoulder screaming, but I was holding him. His hand, slick with his own blood, started to slip. Tamsin, he gasped, his face ashen in the yellow light. No, don't you dare, I screamed, using my other hand to grab his wrist. I was braced against a piece of rebar, my feet slipping. Don't you let go. The fire was raging above us. Bullets were still flying. The world was ending. He looked up at me, his eyes clear, even through the pain. I never have, he breathed. His hand slipped again. His hand was slipping. My fingers were burning, the muscles in my shoulder tearing. The world was just his blood-slicked wrist, the 10-story drop, and the roar of fire. Tamsin, he gasped, trying to find purchase. I've got you, I won't let go, I screamed, my voice raw. The black interceptor boat, the one with the incendiary launcher, was turning, coming back for another pass. Its weapon was aimed right at us. We were two exposed targets, hanging off the edge of the world. Just as the weapon fired, the world turned white, not from fire, from water. A massive, pressurized wall of it erupted from the darkness of the shipyard, striking the FCSD boat broadside. It was a deluge, a man-made wave. The incendiary round fired wild, exploding harmlessly against a rusted bulkhead. What? I looked down. Not one boat, 3. Navacruz was at the helm of a fast, heavy pilot boat, flanked by 2 other industrial tugs. He and his crew of independent dockhands, the men who hated the alliance, had come. The pendant, my signal. They were using their high-pressure water cannons, creating an impenetrable shield of spray. The battle turned. The firefight, which had been a one-sided execution, became chaos. And then my phone, deep in my pocket, buzzed. Not a call, a city-wide emergency alert. I heard it echo from the cars on the distant freeway, a synthesized voice. This is not a test. This is an emergency broadcast system takeover. Stand by for data transmission. My head snapped back to the skate park, to Mick. He was still huddled over Jem, but Jem wasn't hiding. He had a laptop. He had used the chaos, used the open network of the FCSD's own panic, and he had done what he did best. He'd hacked the city. The data stream, the ledger, the names. The payments wasn't just on the Baylight Bridge anymore. It was everywhere. It was on every local TV channel, every radio station, every traffic sign. My brother, the screw-up, the liability he had just become the architect of their destruction. The gunfire sputtered, stopped. Above us, on the lip of the bowl, I saw Isola Kane. Her face, lit by the fires and the glow of the city-wide broadcast, was a mask of utter disbelief. She had lost. The game was over. Mick, help, I screamed, my grip failing. Mick and one of Nava's crewmen were there in a second. They grabbed Cassio under the arms, hauling his dead weight back onto the concrete ledge. He collapsed, groaning, his hand clamped to his side. I scrambled to him, but a hand grabbed my hair, yanking me back. No. It was Isola. Her face was unrecognizable, twisted with a feral, cornered animal panic. She had lost her army. She had lost her reputation. She had nothing left but rage. You, she shrieked, pressing a thin, sharp blade to my throat. You did this, you clown. She hauled me to my feet, using my body as a shield. Her men were throwing down their weapons, hands raised, as Nava's crew and the first wave of real police sirens approached. She was alone. Oh, everyone back, she screamed, dragging me toward the street. Back, or I'll cut her throat. I walk out of here, or she dies. This was it, the final, desperate move. Isola, Cassio's voice. It was a ragged gasp, but it cut through the night. He was on his feet, leaning heavily on the concrete wall, but standing. His gun was gone. His hands were empty. He was pale, soaked in his own blood. "Let her go," he said, taking one agonizing, shuffling step forward. "Stay back. Vallone, I'll do it." "You want leverage," he coughed, a wet, terrible sound. He took another step. "You want a prize. Take me." He held his empty, bloody hands out. "The head of the Vallone family, the man who brought you down, that's a better prize, isn't it? She's nothing. She's just a girl. She's not a chess piece." My heart broke. Even now, he was trying to shield me, to diminish me, to trade himself for me. Isola hesitated. Her eyes flickered. It was a tempting offer, to walk out of this with Cassio Vallone as a hostage. That was her mistake. That half-second of calculation was all I needed. I am not a chess piece. I am not the girl who waits to be saved. My hand, hidden by my body, went to the pendant at my throat. I didn't hesitate. I pressed it hard. A sharp pop, a cloud of dense, acrid, concentrated smoke exploded from the pendant directly into Isola Kane's face. She screamed, a choked, blinded sound, stumbling back, clawing at her eyes. The knife hand flew up, away from me. I didn't wait. I dropped. I twisted. I kicked back. Scrambling away from her, rolling on the concrete, I was free. I had saved myself. Isola, blinded, was staggering. Rook, who had been stirring, saw his chance. He rose, a groan of pure hatred, and made one last desperate lunge, not at me, but at the wounded, defenseless Cassio. Cassio was waiting, and he was in too much pain to be fast, but he was smart. He pivoted on his good leg, letting Rook's momentum carry him past. He brought his elbow down, a single, precise, brutal blow to the back of Rook's neck. Rook collapsed. He didn't move again. Isola was running right into a wall of men. Nava, Mick, they had her. And then, the sound, the crowd. Drawn by the sirens, by the citywide broadcast, the public was arriving. Dozens of people, then 100. Their phones held high, recording. They were the witnesses, the real ones. Isola Kane, her white coat black with soot, her face a mask of defeat, was trapped. Real federal agents, the legitimate ones, were pushing through the crowd. "Isola Kane, you are under arrest for—" The shadow of the FCSD had evaporated, the Night Harbor Alliance. Their secret scrolling across every screen in the city was already a ghost. It was over. The adrenaline vanished. I turned. Cassio. He was sliding down the concrete wall, leaving a dark, wet smear. He didn't stop. He crumpled to the ground, his eyes closed, unconscious. "No," the word was a whisper. "No." I ran to him. I fell to my knees, skidding on the rough ground. His breathing was shallow. The wound in his side. It was too much blood. "No, no, no," I begged. I fumbled in my pocket. The napkin, my cape, the stupid, stained, linen napkin from table 7. It was the only thing I had. I pressed it to the wound. It was useless. Instantly soaked, a small white flag surrendering to the crimson tide. I put my other hand on his cheek. He was so cold. "Don't you leave me," I whispered, the tears I hadn't shed for myself now falling, hot and fast, onto his pale face. "Don't you dare leave me halfway. Cassio, everyone else leaves halfway. Don't you dare." His breathing hitched, and then nothing. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and old canvas. My head was pounding. My cheek was stuck to the arm of a plastic chair. I shot up. I was in a large tent, a field hospital, a blue cross painted on the side. It was daylight. And he was there. He was on a cot, his chest bare, a thick white bandage wrapped around his torso. An IV bag was dripping clear fluid into his arm. He was pale, still as death. But his chest was rising and falling. I let out a sound I didn't know I could make, a half sob, half laugh. His eyelids fluttered. He opened his eyes. They were hazy, unfocused. Then they found me. He didn't speak. He just looked at me. A small, weak, exhausted smile touched his lips. I burst into tears. The real kind. The ugly, snot-nosed, gasping kind, the kind that only come when the terror is finally, truly over. "Hey," I choked out. "Hey," he whispered back. His voice was a dry rasp. Jem appeared at my shoulder. He looked 12 years old and 80. He'd been interviewed by the real feds for hours. He was a witness, not a criminal. He stepped toward the cot. "Mr. Vallone Cassio?" Cassio's eyes moved to him. I'm so sorry," Jem whispered, his voice cracking. "For all of it. For Tamsin." Cassio looked at him, his gaze clear and steady, even now. "Jem," he said, his voice quiet. "Your sister, she's everything." He took a shallow breath. "Live a life that deserves her." Jem just nodded, the tears rolling down his own cheeks. He understood. The city of Brineport was electric. The Baylight Arcade revival, the one Isola had used as cover, had turned into a spontaneous, citywide celebration of liberation. The Alliance was gone. The FCSD was front-page news. A few nights later, the Salt Lark. Mick was already there. He'd been cleared, his old Aegis files confirming his story. He was a hero. He just grunted and said the bar needed a manager. But tonight, the bar was closed. Cassio and I were on the roof, the one with the leaky tar and the view of the water. The string lights were on. He was moving, slowly, painfully. His side was wrapped in bandages I'd helped him change. His arm was in a sling, but he was here. He was alive. I had the napkin. I'd washed it, but a faint, rusty stain remained in the fibers, a permanent reminder. I folded it carefully and placed it on the small, rickety table between us. "I'm thinking of a new bit for my act," I said. The salty wind pulled at my hair. "Oh," his voice was a low rumble, already getting stronger. "Yeah," I said, looking at the napkin. It's about a mafia boss." He raised an eyebrow, the shadow of a smile playing on his lips. "I'm thinking," I said, turning to look at him, "that if I ever tell that joke again, the one about killing a mafia boss, it's only because I'm the one who loves him enough to make sure no one else gets the chance." He didn't laugh. He just looked at me. And his eyes, the dark, guarded eyes I'd first seen through a curtain at table 7, they were open, and they were full of everything. He stood, wincing, and held out his good hand. I took it. He pulled me to my feet, gently, until I was standing in front of him. His good arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me close, flush against his side, careful of his bandages. My hands came up to rest on his chest. I could feel his heartbeat. Slow, steady, real. "Tamsin," he whispered, and he kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of the motel. It wasn't the relieved, breathless kiss of the attic. It was slow. It was deep. It was the kiss of a man who had come home. It was a promise. It was the end of the story. He pulled back, resting his forehead against mine. His breath was warm. He was my shield. Not from bullets, just from the wind. After a long moment, he pulled away and reached into his coat pocket. He handed me a key, a single, old-fashioned brass key. "What's this dust?" "Agnes and Sons, where?" he said. "The photo studio." I looked at him, confused. "It's clean," he said. "The building was seized. I acquired it from the city auction. The lease is paid, indefinitely, by a new organization, the Bay Rainbow Fund. It's legitimate." He met my gaze. I thought it would make a good place for a comedy club, a safe night for the weak. You said, with proper legal security. I was speechless. He wasn't just giving me his heart. He was giving me a stage, a voice. I looked down at the key in my palm. I looked up at him. I was still Tamsin Reed. I was still the girl who had served fried clams. But I wasn't just weak anymore. I was the girl who knew how to speak. I knew how to love. And I knew, finally, how to choose. I looked down, over the edge of the roof, at the street below. I could just see the alcove, the entrance to the Salt Lark. Table 7. The stupid joke that had started it all. It wasn't a joke. It was the punchline. It had delivered me right to him, right when we both needed it. The climax was over, the real one. And this time, justice and love were standing right here at the end. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. If you want to support us further, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.